You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 384, The Rising Storm. We're going to call it Part 1 Overview. Tonight is the first in at least 3 episodes that we're going to dedicate to the High Republic. We'll be back next week with Tempest Runner breakdown, and then we're going to revisit some of the characters and some of the situations, themes, that sort of thing in both the Tempest Runner and the Rising Storm as well the week after that. So we're kind of mixing a lot of things together, and we're finally going to be able to talk about this book. We've read this book. It's been almost 3 months now since we got our copies. And we were just waiting for the Bad Batch to finish. We had a 2-week break that we took off. All that to say, we're back. And it's not just me, though. It's also this guy right here, Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
Thank you, sir. I'm doing fantastic. It's long overdue to get us going on this one. So I'm really excited about this.
Yep. And it should be, I hope you guys, have enough food, water, drinks, that sort of thing, because it's probably going to be about a 2-hour show, given how much we plan on talking about it. And I think what we're going to try to do is really stick to the high level bullets, although there are a lot of them. There are certain things that I do want to touch on that if we didn't speak about tonight, probably wouldn't affect anything. But they're just moments that are so cool, or I feel like, hey, we need to talk about these, or things that maybe we see as seeds that are going to be planted later down the road, or just bring up general questions. I definitely want to make sure that we cover all of that as well. So kind of figuring about an hour and a half to 2 hours, maybe more, depending on how vocal and interactive you guys are as well. So.
That's the thing about this book. It was just, there's so much in it that you could pick so many different chapters apart. I mean, you have 76 to choose from,
right.
So you have no shortage of chapters to choose from. There's so many different things within each one you could really go in and pick apart, or kind of jumping ahead a little bit. And it was just, kind of spoiler alert. This is my favorite, what's it called? High Republic book so far out of all of them. So there make a couple other good ones though, but this one by far is probably the best end to end and just start to finish without any kind of gap in it.
Yeah.
No slow spots whatsoever.
Yeah. I've been pretty vocal about where this sits with me in terms of, whether it's my favorite and all of that. And it is really high up there for me. There's so much going on in this novel that just resonated with me. I mean, it's a good novel on its own, but just on a personal level, some of the things that I was seeing and reading just kind of struck me from, how I view Star Wars, I guess, or what I remember reading about Star Wars or like it about Star Wars. A lot of that is in this book. I know I've mentioned this before, that Cavan Scott, if you go look at the very end of the book, he acknowledges Heir to the Empire as one of his influences. I've seen him post something saying Dark Empire was another one that influenced him. And I don't know where he is in the age range, but my gut tells me he's probably around our age, in that same vicinity, because he seems to be very hyper-focused on a lot of that stuff. And some of the stuff that he tweets about.
He doesn't look as old.
No, he doesn't. No.
He looks a lot better.
Yeah.
Blood.
But yeah, so I think, it's maybe it's a generational thing or not. Either way, it's a great novel. And let's start talking about it, because we're going to skip over news and everything, because there's just a lot to break down here. But what were some of the things, I think, for you that stood out? Like, what were your first impressions? What did you like? And then tell me if there's anything you didn't like about the book.
Ooh, wow. Well, how it ended, I think, was the one part we did not like. Or it wasn't we didn't like it, but it was actually, I really did like it. I loved how they ended the book in particular, because it was finally like there was something seriously at stake. We'd had other stories in Light of the Jedi where we lost people, or things didn't go the way that we thought they would, but they all kind of resolved themselves. Yeah, they had some ups and downs, or some joys and some sadness, but nothing like we had at the end of this one, and to where it actually felt like, okay, there really are high stakes in this. And it was something I think that was a bit missing from the High Republic so far, because we didn't have it. It felt like it was too safe, right? This is the golden age of the Republic and the golden age of the Jedi. What could possibly be wrong or go wrong? And now we're starting to see and understand just how real of a threat not only the Nihil are, but Ro is. And we've seen a little bit of the Drengir, and that kind of gets into the part I don't like, is the Drengir themselves have just completely been, I think, shoved aside to where they were kind of basically dumbed down to a distraction And I don't know if I like that, especially how much they were really built up. And I thought did a really good job in Into the Dark. I think they did a good job in that, and I liked that book quite a bit, especially Leox, probably my
Oh,
favorite character
yeah.
ever now. But, yeah, so I think that was the part I was disappointed about is that we don't we get kind of a one-off line about the Drengir, a couple of times within this book and a little bit of background with how they interact with the Nihil, but that was about it, but I really love that just there's something at stake now. Like, the carnage was real. There was a loss of hope. You had Jedi losing hope. You had people doing the best they can, but you also get kind of the best of people too, but we're also getting these common themes we've had in Star Wars of basically hubris
Hmm.
and just a little bit too much confidence and that overconfidence in what they're able to do. And quite honestly, Lena So for all the things that she wants to do and as fantastic as she is, she's definitely got the curtain pulled over her eyes sometimes about what reality actually looks like. And I think this was a really good book where it brought a number of factions kind of back down to earth, including the Nihil and company like that
Right.
too. So everybody kind of had their ups and downs of this book quite a bit.
Would you say this book was leveling in some way? No, I'm kidding. Hey, so I got a question for you on Lena So because I know you were
Yeah.
pretty vocal about, hey, I don't really trust her. And in all fairness, yes, there were certainly signs out there that really left a lot of people skeptical as to what her plans were. Right? Was she really this truly, I don't know, cookie cutter? What's the word I'm looking for here? But uh, poster boy, poster girl, model
Poster child.
chancellor,
There you go.
right, of the
Right.
Republic,
Yeah.
because this is what we got in the Light of Jedi. She almost felt like too good to be true. And I think this book does a better job of saying, okay, yeah, her intentions are good. However, like you said, she's maybe a little bit more naive than than we initially thought. Maybe she's got aspirations that are just not attainable. She's trying to do things here that well, look good on paper and they resonate with people and they're very uplifting and spiritually uplifting in that way for a lot of the folks, especially right now. Her execution hasn't really been the same. And I think she eats crow, right? She definitely, by the end of the book, she realizes, wow, I'm almost doubting herself whether or not she's doing the right things, given now that, she nearly died and all of that. But I don't know. I think they've done a good job of showing her that showing that she's got good intentions. She's not an evil person. This really is like the best you could probably expect from a chancellor, but I don't think she has, for lack of a better term, the infrastructure or the people or the buy-in from everybody just yet, which is part of why she's doing this, right? She's trying to bring
Right.
everybody together like that.
Yeah. She's stubborn as hell. I mean, it's kind of where it comes to, right? Where she's being given, being challenged in the right way. And Tia Toon is a fantastic counterpoint to where she's at. And some of those scenes were really, really good
Hmm.
because what he's saying, especially as you get throughout the rest of the book and you get a really good idea of where he's coming from and how he truly feels, you're like, "Okay, that makes a
Yeah,
lot of
he's not
sense." Like,
wrong.
how he's going about
Yeah.
doing it is kind of a jerk way of doing it too, right? But she is so stubborn about, "We need this to show," basically to prove how great the Republic is and to really kind of flaunt it of sorts. But you also have to look at the other side. She is trying to bring in the Togrutas, right? She's trying to integrate someone who could be a very, very powerful
Yeah.
ally as well, and give the galaxy and continue to bring the galaxy into a more, this whole spirit of unity, but it was very, yeah, she's trying too hard, I think, all at once and being a bit short-sighted in that and just downright stubborn about it. And I think Tien Toon could do a lot more if he wasn't so high and mighty about what he's, what his agenda is about he wants to push with the defense
Hmm.
force.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's definitely a character that, again, his intentions, he's not wrong on some of these things. It's just the way he goes about it is rubbing people the wrong way. And I think at the very end, he has,
Right.
I wouldn't call it a redemption moment, but you truly get to see that, yeah, he is on the good side and he's willing to do what he needs to do to help out. He's still going to be pushing, as we know now with Tempest runner out, that he's going to be pushing for a defense coalition force of some sort. And it's probably inevitable at this point. So, I know.
Right.
So you've touched on a lot of things. We're going to hit a lot of these as we kind of go through this discourse of the novel itself. But just on the topic of Drengir, because I know Steph and Tawan, thanks for joining us tonight, are in the chat right now. They both mentioned it about how they've been maybe sidelined a little bit, and I would agree. Like, I definitely get the Drengir were something that they were pushing at the announcement of Project Luminous and the announcement of the books, and they seemed like a pretty heavy-handed threat in the first wave of books. and now they've been kind of put to the side, and it was a distraction. I think though where it leaves off, and I don't disagree. Like I actually do agree. As much as I love the Dren gear, and I like the thought of something that just plants again wasn't anything that was ever on my radar as being scary. But I think they did a pretty effective job of showing you that they don't really care. They'll eat anything, and the fact that they've at least given us the context that the Sith were so scared of them that they tried to put these guys away and did so.
Right.
That shows you they are a force, no pun intended, to be reckoned with. That said, where we are now, and just I'm going to step aside one quick second. We are obviously going to spoil everything from the Rising Storm, but we're going to be also talking about things that have happened most recently in the comics, because I think it's relevant to talk about that sort of thing. Maybe a little bit of Tempest Runner. We don't want to pull into that too much, but in the comics, they've kind of just put the Dren gear on the back burner, right? They're not gone, but by the time we get to Tempest Runner, it's been 3 months after the Rising Storm, and the Dren gear are done, and we've
jumped ahead quite a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
We jump ahead, and now, like, and it's been going on, right? We should probably also mention that the Rising Storm is what, a year after Light of the Jedi. So in that entire
9 months to
11,
a year,
yeah,
something
exactly.
like that.
So in that time, they've been out there literally taking over worlds. These Dren gear have. They've been consuming worlds, and it finally gets to the Hutts. And that's where Avar Kriss comes in as well. And I think what we find there is that Marchion Ro has done all of this to get to make a distraction, to get the Jedi to really focus on that because of just how fast they're moving around while he's laying back, laying low. He's got them fighting over here, and he's going to go, it's kind of working up to this tactic of attacking Valo and the Republic Fair. But with the Dren gear, to get caught up on the comics, they actually kind of put them in the progenitor, which is it's kind of like the alien hive mind, the mom, whatever, queen of all of the Dren gear. They put her in the stasis field, and she's there, she's just alive, and that kind of cut the link off to other Dren gear, and that's what kind of stopped the spread, stopped the threat. What they do with that, though, I think is going to come back up. I don't think they're gone per se, but they are definitely going to be put on hold for now. And they could be a threat again to anybody, really. I mean, it doesn't sound like they really had an alliance with the Sith. They could possibly form an alliance with Ro. I don't think at the end of the day, they're going to care. They just want to eat. Right. So, yeah. So enough. The other, before we get into the other book, just kind of what we're going to be hitting tonight. We'll be touching on, of course, the Jedi, the Republic, the Nihil. Some of the themes I think we're going to probably table. We'll probably touch on them lightly, but you mentioned the hubris aspect, which is prevalent throughout the entire book. It's almost in your face at times. There's the theme of unity, right? That's the whole theme of the actual Republic Fair. You could even say that extends to the very end, where the Tragudas join the Republic and they form a unity. There's probably some meta stuff in there with like Elzar Mann and Ty York and their unity, and physical stuff with Man and his girl and real unity. So there's all kinds of themes there. The theme of fear is pretty prominent as well in the novel. These Jedi are definitely starting to get scared. And I just want to touch on this too, because you and I were talking about, you were down here in Austin, and I think we were eating pizza or whatever, but not that that's important. But we were talking about,
it's important to give people a mental picture.
Yeah, we're sitting down eating pizza, talking about Jedi and fear. It was really a great conversation. But we had talked about, when this Project Luminous was first announced, the very end, that tagline mentioned something about the Jedi feeling fear, and that what was coming was going to be a threat to even the Force itself. And I know that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I remember clearly on some of the message boards and Twitter and just social media, folks were like saying, well, they can't control the Force. No one can really control the Force. This isn't what that Force is. And I guess they turned a blind eye to what the Sith are doing. But but that's really kind of what happened. We had just, I guess, speculated that fear and the threat to the Force would be the absence of the Force. And I think what we're seeing is just that, right? You've got the Leveler now who's come in, and that thing can negate all your Force abilities or send you into a spiral. We'll talk about what that was like at the very end. On top of that, so you've taken the Force away from them. So what do they have left now, right? They've got their honed skills, just as people, or as humans or beings or whatever. But then they have, maybe their lightsabers or maybe their blaster weapons. And now you've got a threat that came out in the Rising Storm, where Lorna D has access to this device that negates lasers, whether they be laser swords, whether they be laser bolts. That if you put those two things together, what do the Jedi have at this point, right? And they've never nothing. And
they have unity, Albert.
Right, they've got unity, hubris, and attachments.
Right, yeah, all the good stuff.
All the stuff that's left is great, but it is definitely going to be enough to instill fear in everybody. That's at least a Jedi. Beyond that as well, but I think it also poses a real threat to what. I think it really calls the question: who's going to bail them out of this? Right. I'm starting to wonder if it's even going to be the Jedi. Like, are the Jedi going to be the ones at the very end to get at least past this portion of it, or to get over the hump that we're in right now, going into that third wave? Who is it that's going to pull them out? I don't know that it's the Jedi. I think they're doing a good job of ruling them out, systematically ruling them out as somebody that can come forward. Whether it's the Republic, maybe it's just, everyday people, as we had in the original trilogy, that kind of step up, with the exception of Luke, that step up and save the day. Maybe it's a Lando thing at the very end of, Skywalker.
Rise of Skywalker, yeah.
Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's not the Fets, but the Mandalores. I don't know. There's got to be something there that's going to pull them out of all of this. So, anyways, that was my diatribe on fear and where we are with that. But any thoughts on, I guess, the fear and any other themes that you picked up before we move on to the actual story?
Right. I think the one that struck me the most was all the attachments that we've seen through this, which is driving some of this fear as well. And I think none of it says really tangible as you see with Bell Zettifar in particular. I think this is a great story for Bell, but I think also just the way that you see Jedi and how they are with the master and apprentice relationship. And we get this all the way into the other books that we're reading as well. And we just continue to see these bonds between student and master. And, it's very concerning what they have, because they're not equipped to deal with this stuff. It's the same things we've been dealing with for 40 plus years now of Star Wars, where they're just not equipped to be able to handle any kind of relationship. And where Bell and Loden ended up at the very end of needing each other so much was just so concerning on so many different levels as to why it was so important and why they made it really feel like a really great, good thing, when all I could think about was like, this is just going to end horribly. So, and it did. But again, we see the attachments continue to surface. Elzar Mann is attaching himself to whatever moves these days, and really is so obsessed about his vision and some of the, and we're going to talk about it, how he has to force himself into a vision, and fear is driving the Jedi left and right. And it's just picking up steam. I mean, it's not slowing down. It's just picking up steam, and it's growing to the other Jedi now, to where Stellan Gios is now starting to feel it, towards the end of this one, into other content as well. And it's a very concerning thing that is going to be plaguing the Jedi here pretty soon.
Yeah. Steph says, so basically they didn't get any better at attachments after hundreds of years.
Well, this is the precedent they had.
Right.
It was fantastic. They had a really great starting point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was, in the end, it was probably Anakin more than anybody else that did a horrible job and failed. But this all starts to really make sense now. It's really, for me, I love the fact that it's really starting to fine tune some things that I think we've always thought of or speculated about in regards to the Phantom Menace and where the Jedi are during that time period, that have never really explicitly been said. I mean, maybe mention that this is, they don't have this, they don't have that. This is why they think this, but we're starting to see them put all that, the building blocks in place to kind of see where that's going, more on the attachment side than just about anything else. But more on that in a little bit here. So, okay. So in terms of how we're going to break this down, we're going to go through what, I think we've got basically 5 pillars, if you want to call them that. I want to talk about Elzar Mann and Ty York. They're two people on completely different paths when this book starts, and they end up being on the same path and continue on beyond that, which is really great. We'll talk about Bell, Ember, and Indira, as well as, Loden. We'll tie him as well. They've kind of got their one story going on. You've got Marchion Ro and the Nihil as another storyline. That's kind of the thread that's running through all of this and what they're going through. And then you've got Stellan Gios and just the Republic Fair, and the amount that this guy takes on his shoulders to kind of keep everybody safe and is trying to be the best Jedi that he can, which, without getting into the comics, is starting to cause problems, and we're starting to kind of see all that. So, um, the crawl. Here's one thing that I do want to pull out. We're not going to go through. I was going to read it, but it's going to take too long. The one thing I did want to pull out of the crawl, and you've touched on this already, but in there it mentions that it talks about the Republic as being her latest great work, and I wonder if we're going to see any more great works at this point. I think we see one in the Tempest Runner. It may have been established prior to, and it was just mentioned in Tempest Runner, which is that prison system that they've got.
Rehabilitation.
There you go. Yeah. So there's that, but the Republic Fair itself, for me, when I saw this, it did feel like, I know a lot of people have questioned whether or not, why did they do this? Why did she go move forward a year later when there was a real threat still out there, at least with the Drengir? Maybe not the Nile, because they had kind of stepped back and were really kind of doing little pop shots here and there whenever they needed something. But for the most part, they did step out. But a lot of people were pushing and saying, challenging both in the novel and outside of the novel as to why she would do this. And the one thing that always comes to mind for me is 9/11. Like, you remember after 9/11, for anybody that went through all of that, there was a period when we were all scared, right? We were literally scared, weren't sure about going to the grocery store, the malls, the airports. There was a very, very sense of fear in the air, and it lingered for a number of weeks, maybe months. And at some point we just said, you know what? We're not going to let this control us. We're going to go back to doing what we do. We're going to be smarter about it. We're going to do things about it. But life has to go on. We have to be able to show the people that attacked us that we're not scared, that we're not going to live in fear. And we're going to continue to do the things that we do. And I'm talking about America, right? I'm not talking about anybody else, because I know every country did something maybe a little bit different or had different approaches. But we had the liberty of saying, oh, yeah, we'll just increase our security and throw more money at it. We created Homeland Security. But at the end of the day, we all tried to go back to living our normal lives and not be living in that fear. And I think that's what she was trying to do here, right? She was trying to put something to say, look, yes, we were torn apart literally by the emergencies that occurred and the great disaster. However, and there are threats that are out there. However, we're going to all come together as a system, republic, and we're going to show everybody that we're all still together. We are still a team. We're still unified in that way, in that regard. The only thing that I felt like was like, okay, very short-sighted was just the level of security, right? It didn't seem like that was appropriate for where they were. Maybe they had just been lulled into a sense of really the Nile are gone and the threat is completely extinguished with the exception of these little, skirmishes, that they felt like that really wasn't necessary. And the Drengir weren't, on the radar to come into Valo. Maybe that was it, but it just felt like they would have had more. I would have probably had more, but again, I don't have the whole context of what happened in the last year. But anyway, those are my thoughts. What about you? I guess on that.
Well, and I think the comparison with 9/11, I mean, consider we're coming up on the 20th year anniversary of this, of that day that we all remember quite clearly, if you're old enough to have kind of lived through it. It's actually a really good comparison. I remember when that happened, we had this feeling of this kind of thing doesn't happen here, right? It doesn't happen. And if you think about it in the terms of Republic, things like this don't happen this far into the core, right? This is, they're in like mid-rim, I think, something like that. But there's been nothing that's been pushed this far into the core of the Republic. And the Republic, when you think about Coruscant and some of the other core worlds, we've seen this time and time again. They're very isolated and very protected from what happens outside the galaxy. Not all the time. We've seen this in Revenge of the Sith, of course, and a couple other things. But for the most part, it's this completely different part of the galaxy that just is completely oblivious to what happens in the mid and outer rims. And so this is one of those places that you just know that they take it for granted because, well, no, they've never really done this before. We shouldn't. You kind of you get the same kind of parallels, right? Some of those same feelings of, yeah, there's some threats, but we probably we think we're okay. We have the Jedi here, and we rely on that.
Right.
And then when you had the whole thing at the Cycler shipyards, it was still another flag, but it wasn't. And again, they just keep thinking that, well, they're scattered. They're really, like you were saying, they're really not doing anything of notable damage, and they're not really, and they seem to be just flying off this, just doing whatever they want willy nilly. There's no real organization to it. But I mean, and I think kudos to Markion Rowe and company, right? Because this was the strategy, this was the plan.
Yeah,
lull them into a sense of comfort and that they're gone or that they're not a threat anymore. And they'll just kind of reach out and handle things as they come and not be really serious about it in any kind of way. and they really exploited that type of thing. So I'm right there with you. The security in general, having really one or two Jedi, which was really what was the case, right? It was
Yeah.
really Elzar, and then Stellan Geo showed up and a few others, but really it was just him overseeing the preparations for the entire event.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of that, I mean, we've talked about it, right? Part of that is just the hubris. It's the hubris of the Republic. It's the hubris of the Jedi themselves. We've got we've got Elzar Mann there, right? He's the Marshal. Why are we, or what was his title? I forget now. It wasn't Marshal, something else.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, I mean, they felt like, okay, we had him there. That should be enough, right? We don't need anything else. And of course, we're going to have all the Jedi show up once the Republic Fair is going on. So that should be enough. We don't really need to do anything more than that. So yeah, it makes sense. It does. I'm not throwing stones at the story in itself. I'm going to take it at face
Oh
value.
no! Again, it parallels reality, right? I mean, this is that same type of thought is what we had 20 plus years ago.
Right.
You know, it won't happen here.
Yep. All right. Well, let's get into this. I've got for anybody that's listening to the audio version, we're going to have some visuals up, and we'll try to do our best to talk about them as we're going through. But these are more just to kind of help spur the images and remember for us old people that are trying to walk you through all of this. So the book opens up after the crawl there. We get the prologue where Elzar Mann he's been having these visions, and they will not go away. The screams, everything that we saw at the very end of Light of the Jedi, and he can't shake them. He has another vision, and he goes and does some research and decides, based on his research, he needs to actually go out to one of the moons on the moon of Ashla. And there he finds the sea, which is appropriate, right? Because he sees the Force as the ocean, right? A raging sea, raging ocean kind of thing, which is more appropriate now that we know about him. Like we've been talking about whether or not he would go to the dark side. And I know after Light of the Jedi and Wave 1, I was convinced it was going to be him. I'm not convinced it is him at all now, even though he has touched the dark side because because of what he's going through. I don't think that's going to be the right person. It's going to be somebody else. However, it's super interesting that he's gone as far as he did, which we'll get to here in hour number 3. But he goes out to the ocean, and he's like trying to find some inspiration, trying to make sense of it all, which is it was very creepy to me, because like when I think of water, like the ocean at nighttime, like the first thing that comes to mind is that opening scene of Jaws where the girl goes out and swims, right. And I'm like, I would never go swim in an ocean in the dark, right? Much less in the daytime, but never in the dark. But I thought it was appropriate for him to go out there. But there were some interesting things that came about that in his vision itself, and then just his thoughts around Avar Kriss. I think we got a sense that, okay, these guys had something going on during their Padawan years. And I think what we're seeing is that happens with Padawans just in general. They're very flirtatious, and they very much are into attachments. And as they get older, they almost tend to force themselves away from that. Like, okay, we can't do it. I mean, Avar even tells them, look, we're not Padawans anymore. We can't be doing this. But I don't remember if it was this novel or if it was Out of the Shadows or one of the other ones that they mention this again, and they talk about how it's kind of natural, which you think about it is not uncommon, right? I think they're allowing horny teenagers to be teenagers and have relationships and all of that. But I think what's required is that at some point, upon knighthood or prior to, they need to drop it, and they need to cut it away as much as possible, although it still happens, but still very different than what we got from the Jedi and during the prequel trilogy as well. But give me your.
You're right. That was Out of the Shadows. I think with Reese and Emery of sorts, and yeah,
kind of talking about it.
Thing. And yeah, I think it was all of that. I think the one thing I got from this scene though is the desperation that Elzar has. I mean, he's at wit's end. He's just he's trying to grasp onto anything that will. I don't even know if it's so much help illuminate him what he needs to do, but give him relief from it.
Mm-hmm.
Is the feelings I ended up getting is that he's just so desperate to get this off of his chest and to be able to resolve it and figure out so he can move on and do something, just to be relieved of the stress of it more than anything else. And perhaps I'm drawing too much from the Anakin Vader story, a bit self-centered of sorts, but I get this impression from Elzar a bit that he is a bit serving at times.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say he's a bad Jedi or a bad person or anything like that. He's still human, literally. So, but it's a thing of is he just so desperate he'll do anything to do this? And I think we see this desperation more than once as we go through the story, and especially when he finally unleashes all of this emotion, it all boils
Yeah.
over, and it just finally shows you that. And we do get this from Stellan throughout the story too, right? That Elzar has always been the more emotional of the
Yeah.
three. He's the one who wears his emotions more on his sleeves. He's a bit more temperamental at times, but also outside the box, right? Creative and does different things. So his strengths are also his weaknesses, but those are also can be greater strengths if you're able to manage them.
Hmm.
But it was a very interesting concept though of forcing yourself underwater. But I mean, it was there's just I just felt bad for him at some point because you could just see that, and I almost thought that he wasn't going to get a vision, which would have been, I think, usually what we would experience from this type of thing. Where it's, but again, it's one of these things. It's like a what was it? It was like Deadpool, right? Where the only way to get your genes to mutate is if you're under severe stress or something like
Yeah.
that. And it was effectively the same thing. The only way you can have a vision is if you are under really significant stress to the point of you're putting your life in
Yeah. I
danger.
mean, he was gasping for
But again,
air. I mean,
yeah, it just shows you the desperation though in general. And it was just sad for me actually. For I felt bad for him because he's really losing it.
yeah. I mean, it was tormented, right? I mean, that's probably the best word
Yeah.
to use is that vision had been
Yeah, it's a great
tormenting him
word.
for better part of a year now. So
And his vision was super intense, right? If
right.
you remember, he had blood coming from his nose. It fell to the ground. I mean, it was
Yeah.
intense.
Yeah. It rocked him. I mean, they was seeing things that he would never, probably never thought he would ever see in his lifetime, right? That again, because they've
Right.
been in this period of time with peace and tranquility and prosperous and all that. The so here one thing that I did, and it's not in the show notes. I've already pulling audible on you, but one thing that that I keep going back to as well with the three, right? They call them the firebrands, Stellan, Elzar, and Avar. Uh, there's there's a very Camelot kind of thread being put out there for these guys, right? You've got, and I'm not saying it's like in your face just yet, but I can see it going there where you've got Elzar Man who is just in love. I mean, he's in love, whether he says it or not. He's at least enamored, but to me, he feels like he's in love with her, and he wants to rekindle those feelings that they had when they were younger. When he hears that she's going to be showing up at Valo, is it Valo or Valo? Okay.
Vallow. Yeah.
So when they show up at Valo, he's expecting her to get down from the ship. He got really excited when Stellan Geos had told him, "Hey, yeah, Avar's coming." Right? He got really excited, like, "Whoa!" You know.
Oh, well, no, he didn't. But her ship started
Well,
descending.
yeah, and then once the doors open, he was like,
Yeah.
out walks Oberlin. It's like talk about a total letdown, right? I mean, he's not. That's not what he was wanting. So in my mind, he does have some pretty strong feelings for her. And I wonder if, although the comic book kind of contradicts this now, the most recent issue, but I was starting to think, well, maybe we're going to get a Stellan Geos and Avar Chris love relationship like this, kind of, we've never really talked about it, but it's always been there, that rocks him and creates this whole Guinevere, Arthur, Lancelot kind of situation or relationship, that bizarre love triangle that a little bit later. And I thought, well, maybe that's what eventually becomes like the first peg that they put in this whole fallen star thing, right? Maybe it is Avar Chris that falls, or maybe it's a Stellan Geos that falls because of this, and maybe that's at the center of where that's going to go. Again, this is all headcanon, so, and I'm sorry for throwing that at you, but I will say that the short story here is, it feels like there is some makings of a Camelot, Lancelot, yeah, King Arthur and Guinevere kind of situation going on there. But we'll see. Who knows if it
Yeah.
really comes up?
Well, at the very least, it's clear that Stellan understands and knows the thing between Elzar and Avar Chris. And I was actually happy to see the comic really made a clear distinction between that. But we also get the tension between Avar Chris and Stellan
Yeah,
Geos at times too, where they butt heads now, between council members of what they think they should be doing, and then whether they agree on things or not. And you can tell it's not a lovers quarrel type of thing at all, which I was actually very relieved to have. But it's really more of there is a mutual respect there, but they both have very strong convictions about what they have, and they're just very different people.
hmm,
And I think this dynamic between the three of them, it's really cool that they had kind of a triumvirate, already, and that they really probably complement each other quite nicely as a group of Padawans and
yeah,
all of that. But yeah, I'm glad it's not going in that direction. I was more concerned it might go there, but I think Stellan in general, and we get this throughout this book a couple of times that Stellan is feels like he has to take care of Elzar. He's the one that has to look after. It's like this big
Yeah.
brother
He's always
mentality,
bailing him
right?
out of jail kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. And I kind of view Stellan has this somewhat parental type of aura about him in general with people, even though he really sometimes feels like he's above everyone. I think there is a bit of arrogance there of, place and purpose, although he usually dials that back down and is very personable when he's able to kind of get over himself a little
Yeah.
bit. But this book stresses a lot of that, right? That no one likes the sound of their own voice more than Stellan Geos
Yep.
does, right? Especially when he's in teacher mode.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But but it's great. It's great to have someone like Elzar though who can sit there and just poke at him too.
Right.
And just, hit all the buttons, do all the triggers.
The key takeaway here is he eventually thinks that, oh, he gets a vision. His vision, long story short, is he sees that he needs to go to Valo, right? And
Right.
and again, this plays into the hubris piece as well, because in his mind, he's like, oh, the answer is I just need to go to Valo. That's it. And literally that's what he does. And he even talks about this in the novel, how he thought all he had to do was just show up and somehow this was going to fix everything. He didn't do what he was supposed to be doing, like, being the watchdog. He's out there in bed with somebody else and he feels a lot of grief and regret after that happens. But again, it's just the arrogance of it all. He felt like he was just going to be enough by showing up. Let's move into the second thread here, which was the most interesting for me. Like the fact that it starts off is, early on in chapter 2, we get right into this out of the gate. This whole seeing Marchion Ro, which was great because we didn't really get to see a whole lot of them in the first one. Well, we did, but we didn't get a lot of background, and we got some of it here, although probably more questions now than answers for a lot of
Right.
Marchion Ro. But essentially, Marchion Ro he's flying out to a planet, and on this planet, it's he's looking for something in the shrine, right? Again, an ancient evil as what we call this portion of it. But the really interesting aspect of it was Udi Dis. Like, I like this character a lot. I don't know that we'll ever get anything from him, but he's got a very interesting backstory, which we won't get into, other than he was like basically a crackhead that Marchion Ro brought him in, kind of got him on his feet, and he helped him to get better and gave him a position of, I guess, power, gave him a seat at literally seat next to him on the ship, and allowed him to call him by his first name at one point, I think, or Mark.
Right.
He was doing all these things, and you're thinking, man, this guy really is, somebody's looking out for him. And the horrible, tragic thing is, Marchion Ro is doing this for a very specific reason, to use him. He's just a pawn. He's literally going to be fodder a little bit later. And it can't help but break your heart by the end when we get to the very end of his life, which isn't very long. It's like several chapters in when he kills him, Marchion Ro kills him. But the fact that he's force sensitive was also interesting. And we almost got the sense that Ro didn't even know he was force sensitive. And the minute he did, he brought him in and did all these wonderful things for him. But he brings him in here, and they're heading out to this planet. And, they've could have, Udi Dis even tells him, like, why didn't we just use a path? Why are we navigating to this asteroid field? I have a visual here on our way there. Why didn't we just jump there? And he's like, well, I want to see you in action. And what he's doing, he's feeling him out. He wants to see just how well his force abilities are, right? He's got this natural ability to kind of feel everything spatially. And that whole race does, which is interesting too.
Yeah, the whole Telortai. Yeah, it seems to be a Telortai racial characteristic of sorts.
Yeah, and I did not remember.
Maybe they were in the Old Republic video game. You just don't remember that part.
I don't remember that.
Was that a racial ability?
No, I don't think it was Old Republic. I thought it was a mobile game or something.
I was kidding. Oh, that was a joke.
Okay,
Wow, Stellan. Right.
It's not the Old Republic, but it was a mobile game. And so I never played the game, so I'd never even heard of this race, but they're really kind of fascinating. The way they view the Force is interesting too. They're like, they have it, but they don't really use it. Like, it's there. They acknowledge that it's there, but it's uncommon for their race to even take advantage of it. They don't become Jedi. They don't really flaunt it around. It's just an ability that they have, which is very interesting that they would suppress it in that way almost. But for him, he's been on hard times, and he'll do whatever he needs to do to get the advantage and get a leg up on whatever in his life. And so he does. But yeah, so I guess give me your thoughts on this before we get into, getting to the shrine and meeting up with, was there Kaffa?
Yeah.
Kufa.
Yep. Yeah. I remember when we were first reading this book, and I don't remember what we did. We were texting back and forth, and you asked me what I thought of Udi Dis. I was like, I can't believe that what they did to him, like how he's already gone. It was such an interesting character. Like you said, he got this backstory of, on what was it called? Real stems or something like
Oh,
that.
it was
Can't
drugs or
remember.
whatever it was.
Yeah, whatever the drugs were, and just joined the Nihil, and just this weird story with his father, and all these things. And it was clear that Roe was using it, but we had no idea what it was for.
Mhm.
And this part of the story, like the build up here throughout it, was really, really interesting. And this is one of those times I did both I read read the book a couple times and also listened to the book like one and a half times. And so this is where the book was like so much stronger, I think, than it was great to hear the aspects of some of the stuff, but reading it and having that thing build up in your head is just so much more powerful sometimes than when you hear it and you hear it voice acted, even though it was done spectacularly by Mark Thompson. But it was just with the way that this just continued to grow, and Markion testing him, especially when they get in like closer to the shrine and you start to see the effects it's having on Udidus. And I love this artwork, by the way, of how they drew that character, very like a bold, like bald eagle type of shape of a nose,
Mhm.
but we're regular, very angular on the beak. And I did not know that his little blades were that big. Actually, I was visioning something closer to what like Dryden Voss had, like the
Oh,
wing
yeah, yeah.
blades.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I couldn't remember what they were actually called, but anyway, but it was such a great like build up for all of this of Markion just testing him one after another. And one thing I liked about the audiobook in this respect, though, is that you do get to hear the inflection from Markion as it gets further into the cave, and the condescension of sorts in his voice that you don't always get when you're reading the book and trying to interpret it as you go. So it was a very interesting dynamic. But this is a really good character. I thought this was fun, and I couldn't believe, spoiler alert, that basically they kill him off so
Yeah.
quickly. But
Oh, it's
again, it
tragic.
was very much for a purpose, though. I mean, it served the purpose, right? But it was weird. Like, why do you get rid of something like that? But it just shows you how much Markion Rowe truly does not like Force users, except for one lady in a pod, I guess.
Maybe. All right. To be determined.
Possible.
It's possible. There's this is just a quick visual of the squall spider. It's come up before, I
Mm.
think, and it's made appearances in the comic, primarily in the um, High Republic Adventures comic is where we got this. And so
Right.
they actually had it in one of the comics. They've got a spread where you can kind of see it.
How is that thing space worthy?
So I think what it does, yeah, I don't know. I think what it does is it folds its legs in, like curls up, almost like a dead
Mhm.
spider, and that's how it traverses in space, and then it opens up when it needs to land, and then it can walk around and do all that stuff. It's a very different design, like different. I mean, I don't know that there's anything even close to this, like in Star Wars. Well, I say that some of the droids that we got in the prequel trilogy, right? I think was one called a
Right.
spider or something or whatever, but it's not important. So that's just a quick visual of that. But eventually, they make their way to this planet, and this is what do they call them? It's the Rystan planet, right? In the Rystan Badlands is where they're going to, and this
Mhm.
is like this tidally locked planet, which means on one side it's perpetually hot, on the other side it's perpetually cold because it doesn't rotate; it just sits there the entire time. You can kind of see it here. This is actually
I don't think that's how the universe works, but okay.
well, yeah, I don't know.
It was an interesting
It
concept,
is a
though.
thing though. Like if you go look online in the real world, there are tidally locked planets. I looked it up. Yeah.
Really? Huh.
So I don't know how. Again, I don't know the science behind it. I'm not going to pretend to. But yeah, this is. There's plenty of images out there people have created of what this would look like. So either way, they land on the dark side of the moon, if you will. They head into the. They head into this planet. They meet up with Kufa, who's like this. I guess she calls him a cousin. I don't know that she meant that literally, as in a blood relative. It's hard to. I couldn't deter.
I think I think I took it somewhat
Yeah,
literally.
and that's fine. I think
Yeah.
that's even cooler if that is the case. Uh,
So it sounded like that was part of his clan, even if he wasn't necessarily close, or maybe more of a somewhat distant type of
Yeah.
relative. But
we don't get a lot from him on this background here outside of. Well, I shouldn't say that. We get more than we probably have yet to date during these as leading up until this whole thing's over with in the shrine. But she addresses him. There's all kinds of stuff we're going to get into later. Not in this episode. We're going to break this down in a future episode about his past and the path, and potentially, or we'll speculate on where he came from and what does the leveler do, and all of that stuff in another episode. But it's the key takeaway here is at some point this leveler was out and about and was leveling Jedi, or at least, or like she does not, Kufa does not have a good viewpoint on the Jedi, right? She's almost of the same mind,
Right.
like, I hate those guys and someone needs to really put them in their place kind of thing, right? And so, and it feels like that's kind of where all of his clan or his race or whatever it is that he's coming from were in that same boat. And so at some point, this thing, this benevolent force, the leveler, was locked in the middle, down far below into this planet here. And Markion Ro is there to release it. They make their way through the whole thing. When they finally get there, Udi Dis is like starting to have visions. Like he starts having, and this is going to play out a little bit later with Loden Greatstorm and or Bell and Elzar, I think. But he starts having these visions as they get closer and closer, and he starts to realize that his senses are starting to dull. Like at one point, I think he gets punched or he dodges something, and he makes a comment about how he didn't feel it for once.
Right.
It was a very unusual feeling for him that he couldn't feel where Markion Ro was relevant to him because he's so good at this spatial recognition type thing. And that's just showing you that even though the leveler is encased in ice, this being is encased in ice, it still radiates this effect that negates the force abilities of force sensitive users. When they finally get down into it, there's another being that they fight. I forget what that thing was called. It's like this tentacle looking thing.
Right.
And that thing pretty much takes out Udi Dis for the most part. I mean, and it puts him on his heels. That's when he falls down. He rushes over to him and asks him if he's okay. And, what are you feeling kind of thing? He's trying to get a sense of like, what was it like? And just, he's basically using him as a guinea pig to test whether or not, his force powers are being negated is really what it boils down to. And once he confirms that, he says thank you to him, turns around, slashes Kufa's neck or kills her. Then he crushes his head, steps on him and says thank you. And just, that's it. That's how he dies. And then, I guess he calls in at the very last part of this. He calls in for somebody to come pick him up. And then we don't really see these guys until really much later in the book, if not towards the very end. So I don't know. Any other final thoughts? I mean, it's a very tragic story for a character that like you said, they give you a lot of background and it really kind of builds up. You're thinking, wow, this is a really interesting character. And then he gets his head stepped on at the very end. He's just done. That's just the end of it. So that's, Cavan Scott doing what he needs to do, pulling on your emotions like that.
I liked how they did give a little bit of background to Markion Ro though as well, where you're getting these impressions of what his culture is like or used to be like, as well as what his, for lack of a better word, his clan's history with the Jedi or with Force users in general, if we're going to generalize that a bit more, and understand that there is bad blood between them. And the term the leveler is very appropriate to level the playing field, right? And just have something that neutralizes their abilities. Oh, this is really, I mean, you see the writing on the wall pretty quickly with this one, even though they're still very vague about what the leveler is. And there's these droids, and I think that's the part, the droids I think were involved and ended up getting Udi stabbed. There was a fight there. But it's just this weird, I kept calling it a shrine, and not necessarily a beast or an animal. And so it was very unclear what they were exactly doing or what was happening this entire time. So the buildup for this, Cavan Scott did a fantastic job on it, but it really did give you a little bit of idea of where Markion and Kufa, and it was clear that Kufa knew quite a bit. And she just had this like crazy aunt type of vibe to her though. And which was irritating because you're like, I want to know more. Just quit being crazy for 5 seconds and just tell us what you know, please.
Stop being cryptic
at
times too.
Right. Yeah. But then you get the impatience of Markion, this kind of youthfulness that he's got an issue, or that his father, because he has these kind of visions too of his dad and all of the daddy issues in Star Wars, of course. But it was like, just please give us a little bit more because we're missing something really important about the backstory of the Ro family or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And it just came back to me. I think it was one of the Sentinel droids. We kind of didn't. We kind of glossed over some of the finer
details. This is
details.
The issue, not going chapter by chapter.
Yeah, but here we are.
The Sentinel droids had a fight. Yeah.
He got stabbed by one of the Sentinel droids because his force powers weren't working.
Yeah, he couldn't sense much.
Yeah, and he thought Ro was going to save him, and no, did quite the opposite. The whole imagery though too of that leveler being in like a shadow that's just kind of sitting there. I mean, we still don't really have a lot of detail in terms of what it looks like. Even at the very end when this thing's running around rampant, we just know it runs on all fours and it has a lot of teeth. I think is probably the best that we got from it. But yeah, that whole scene and just how they set it up, and yeah, tons and tons of questions around the shrine and what was it for, and they use something called a path, which is a pronoun, like a proper noun. They actually use a capital P.
Right.
So we got to get into that too. Like that, I'm like, well, okay, so what is that? What is the path now? I mean, they've talked about paths and the paths, but not in this sense. And so there's a lot of mystery still around.
Yeah, this was almost more like oh God, we've it's been a few years since we spoke about this, but those like the trials, right? Where you have to walk the path to, to transition to the next step,
Mm-hmm.
right? These what are they called? We used to talk about this in the very early shows we did together, but
You talking about the force
anyway,
sensitive, like the force followers and stuff like that? You mean, or
no, like the vision quests and things like
oh,
that.
right.
I think it's what yeah. Things, similar things like that, where you've got to go and accomplish something, and you have to walk this path, and you have to do the certain things, and it felt very much like a journey in order to like a spiritual journey almost of sorts.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We're gonna move over to Cyclor. So Cyclor. Well, I didn't put anything in here for Ty York. There is a thread. We'll come back to Ty York in a little bit. Just quickly on her, we're introduced to her very early on. She is a monster hunter at this point, and it's so funny. Everything that's come out so far, he's been very clear. He being Cavan Scott, of ensuring that somebody says, "Will you help me?" Right, and they call it out. And it happens like twice in this book. It happens in the comic book as well in Monster at Temple Peak. But she's a monster hunter. I think at this point after this novel, she says she's going to be done. She's only going to stick to monster hunting, and she's not going to be doing anything else. But I guess the long story for her, I guess here real quickly, is she's been hired to go save some kids on a certain planet. I'm trying to Safrina, I think is the name of the planet. And
Something like that.
she gets into a battle with some Drengir. I think we do have an image of it. I may have these out of order here. Here we go. Ty York. Yep. I love her lightsaber. It's a very cool design. And the spikes, I always wondered, like, what would happen if you stabbed somebody? Well, this book actually addresses that later on as well.
Right.
But
we actually found that this is an addition she made to it after leaving the order too.
Like
we didn't find it. It's not in this book, but we see it in other material.
Spruced it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But this is she does eventually find out that these kids are missing, and there's a Drengir. She gets into a whole battle with them, which was a really cool, very cool in terms of how he described that battle. And I think he did a really good job. For me personally, I think he did a good job of explaining a lot of these battles. Like sometimes they can get really into the weeds in a lot of the details, and you kind of get lost in some of that. I think he does a good job.
Pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, pun intended. But I think he does a pretty good job. Cavan Scott does a really good job, actually, of describing a lot of the battle sequences without giving you too many details. It still give you the visuals that you want. And on that regard,
right,
that's what reminded me a lot of Heir to the Empire. Like there's so many battles and so many things, and it's easy to get lost with Thrawn and his tactics that I think Zahn does a really good job, at least in that one. Later on, I think he's kind of veered off a little bit, in my opinion. But it was similar here. Really good way of describing it. But yeah, so she ends up doing this, and then she just kind of goes on to this next mission that somebody wants her to basically escort her, kind of hire her as the muscle, and head out to the Republic Fair. She doesn't really know the inner dealings of what's going to happen, and she accepts the deal or whatever. And we'll come back to that here in just a little bit in terms of where that's going to go. A very light introduction for her. We get a lot more later on in the book, and then if you picked up Monster at Temple Peak, there's a lot of information in that one as well. So good stuff. She's really becoming a character. I wasn't like on the bandwagon with her when this book came out. It wasn't until like the second or third reading, and then certainly after the comic, that I was like, okay, yeah, I kind of do really want to know more.
Yeah.
Any quick thoughts on Ty York before we jump into Battle of Cyclor?
I'm liking where she's going as a character. We'll talk a little bit more as we get into Valo and the actual battle, and get a little more about her journey, I think, as we get into other episodes too, throughout the coverage here for Rising Storm. So we won't get too much in the detail right now because it's all pretty introductory for her. But I'm becoming more and more of a fan, especially if like the Monster at Temple Peak looks like it might be something really interesting as well. So if you're into comics, you might go check that one out. Fantastic artwork on it, by the way.
Oh yeah, is it Rachel Stott? I forget her last name, but man, it's good stuff. So okay, so then we cut over to, so now we're getting into Bel Zedifar's kind of storyline, what's happening with him. And really, this is just kind of a setup to set up some things that are going to happen with the Nihil. But essentially, you've got this Innovator class, this ship called the Innovator, which This is the actual artwork that they produced for it, and it's the top of the line ship, right? The best medical facilities. They've got tons and tons of Bacta on here. It's a science vessel. So think of like Star Trek and the NC 1701, right? The Enterprise heading out there, kind of thing. It's supposed to be just going around traveling. So really, again, a really flagship title. I don't think they ever talk about it being as a great work of any sort, but it certainly is something that's on everybody's radar. And the whole point is they're getting this thing ready on the Cyclor shipyards because they want to haul it out to the Republic Fair and have it on display and have everybody see, wow, look what we're doing with all your money that we're taxing you for, right? So while Bell is there with Ember and Adira, they're kind of all on here just kind of being the security and overseeing and everything. Of course, the Nihil come and attack, and they pop into hyperspace like right above them, right? So we know they're using the paths. There's some casualties that happen as a result of that. There's a battle that goes on, which I really don't want to get into too much detail here. I think one of the big key takeaways is that at this point, he's really struggling with Loden being gone, as we would expect. He can't feel him in the cosmic force, right? So he's not really sure if he's dead. He thinks if he was, that he would at least feel him there, and he doesn't certainly feel him in the living force, right? It's almost and so to deal with all this, he cuts himself off from the force. Like much like Luke did, he has shut down everything. He doesn't even open up the force until later on, like his presence really, until later on when we get to Valo, he finally decides to do it. And he's like one of the very first people that realizes, holy crap, there's something really big is about to go down. But at this point, he's shut himself off and he's trying to deal with all this. He shut himself off from the force because he doesn't want to address the possibility of knowing one way or the other whether or not Loden Greatstorm's alive. I mean, he clearly says that in this. Eventually, as the battle goes on with the Nihil, we come to find out a little bit later that this wasn't like a, I guess, authorized battle, right? They're supposed to be laying low, and this is one of Pan's groups, one of his storms that are heading out here and doing this attack. And it's enough that
on Pan's orders.
Yeah, on Pan's orders, exactly. Because Pan, this is with Pan, we get more of this a little bit later, but he's just had it with Markion Ro. He's had it with the structure of everything. He feels like he should be the ones calling the shots. We got some of that in Light of the Jedi. We get a lot of it here. We get even more of it in Tempest Runner as well. But he's just done. Like he doesn't really want to listen to orders, and he's about ready to try to take his place and usurp Markion Ro as the leader of the Nihil. This particular story ends with Bell getting hit in the stomach by a harpoon, which you think is going to kill him. I mean, Cavan Scott does a job here of really playing up that he's been hurt, mortally wounded. I don't even understand how he survived outside of the Force and Ember, and probably the only person, I think it was what's his name?
Well, Adira was keeping the ship from getting sucked inside out.
Yeah, from the pressure and everything. And then when he finally does, I guess, land, it's Porter Engle who shows up, and they get him out to They get him out in the Innovator and save his life. We'll get to that here in just a little bit, but overall, I mean, it was really good. It gives us a really good sense of where Bell Zettifar is. I know he's a fan favorite for a lot of people. He's definitely one of mine. But yeah, it was just sad to see him in his current state and really not getting any resolution to all of this until the very, very end, which makes it that much more dramatic when he finally feels Loden's presence again.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's clear that, Bell's a fan, or people are such a fan of Bell, I think, just because he's probably one of the more relatable characters I think that we have as far as the Jedi go. He's down to earth. He wants to do the right thing. But he's really struggling. It's all these things that we experience every single day in a variety of ways, and our own, senses of attachments and what we're doing. But also, he doesn't want to let Indira down. He feels bad about not being a good enough apprentice for Indira because he is so hung up on Loden and doesn't want to insult her. And she's been so accommodating and really, really, really good for Bell as well. And she challenges him in the right ways. And she does some of the same types of prodding that, Loden would do as well. And I think he appreciates that on some extent. But I think, Bell is probably, I would imagine if you polled people, Bell is probably one of the favorite Jedis in general right now, just from not only what his character is, but just some of his abilities too. And of course, Ember is just the best. But Yeah, this was really traumatic though when he got harpooned through the gut, and they just kept saying gut, like the actual word, and it was not good. And when you have Porter Engel saying it's not good more than once,
Yeah.
it's you know it's got to be bad.
Yep.
But again, thankfully they had the innovator pretty close by, and we can just dunk him in some Bacta. It was the first time, and I remember you and I texted again about this one. Really, the first instant of mass use Bacta in in this this era, which was kind of interesting and you know, so very reminiscent of the visuals of Luke Skywalker, after the Wampa attack. But
Yep.
still, it was kind of the first mass application that we've seen about it, and it's just kind of picked up steam ever since.
Yeah. There's the other part of it that we'll get into later in another episode is if anybody, he's one of the ones that really is struggling with this whole attachment thing. And Adira has this great conversation with him about attachments, and we get some really good viewpoints on where the Jedi are with attachments and what it means to be
Yeah.
attached and all of that. And it's not as black and white as it probably should appear to be if you're a fan of the Jedi during the prequel trilogy, right? There's some nuance to it. It's not as simple. And she addresses it, but at the very end, it's still same principle, right? You still can't allow them to kind of control you, but they're much more open to it here. They're much more embracing of it from the beginning, where I feel like the prequel trilogy Jedi are like, no, never. I mean, the minute you start to feel it, shut that thing off. And I can't help but think that this is what we're seeing is a result of that, right? The way the Jedi are in the prequel trilogy is because they've taken this stance here and during this era, and there are some really bad things that are going to come from it. And so it's going to play into how they perceive attachments and how they perceive the Jedi, how they interpret the Jedi code in greater detail later down the road.
Yeah, and it's not limited to the Padawans. I mean, we even have it with the great Stellan Geos, right?
Mhm.
He carries the lightsaber around of his master, and Elzar calls him out on it. When are you going to stop carrying around, that relic? And his answer is as soon as I've learned everything that has to teach me, even though she's dead.
Mhm.
And so, but again, it's this a certain level of attachment. But I think it's interesting though. What I liked about Indira, and there was somebody else in the book, or maybe I'm thinking it's in a different book, but we do have different perspectives on it. That it is okay to grieve. It's okay to feel. Like you don't have to be afraid of the. You don't shut the valve off just because you're a Jedi. You have to still experience them and acknowledge them. And the fundamental difference between that and a Sith or anybody else is that you just don't let them control you. You don't let those emotions control you. And that's the detachment that they're talking about. It's not that they're detaching from people or detaching from emotion or anything like that. It's just not letting it control everything you do and let yourself get so consumed with it that it just governs everything single thing you're going to do from here on out. And you just have no control over yourself because you're just off the chart. You're just off the rails at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. There's, yeah, as far as that whole, yeah, you're right. No, the attachment piece of there's something really bad is going to happen, and it's got to be stemming from attachments in general because they're so anti every attachments and just about everything when we get to the prequel trilogy. I'm pretty excited to hear and see what came about and why they got to that point.
Well, and I know we need to move on, but it's interesting. You have the attachment kind of between Stella and Avar and Elzar,
Mhm.
right? But then you've also got it with the Padawans in particular. And I noticed this in some of the material that's just come out recently where, Bell was really excited to go see Buryaga, and all of the Padawans are excited to see each other once again, Wreath and Vernestra and Imra. I mean, so you get all these characters that are really, I think it was Out of the Shadows. There was a kind of a scene of all of this stuff where you really sense they have these bonds, but also it just seems like it's a little more than what maybe the Jedi would prefer them to
Yeah.
have. Not necessarily relationships like physical relationships or hormone induced relationships, but just the friendships they have and the attachments they have to one another and the types of things that they depend on one another for are quite a bit more than I think they prefer.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's an Out of the Shadows. Somebody mentions that they're thinking about who was going to be somewhere they were going, and they were really excited about it, and that was going to make them feel better, right? They're relying on that to make them feel better
Yeah.
rather than relying on the Force, which is probably a no-no given what we know about the prequel trilogy, Jedi and beyond, or maybe it's not, right? So this is some more images that we're throwing up here. If anybody was wondering what the scav droids look like, that is an image of them. That's from the comic book. So almost looks like those things from was it the Matrix trilogy, right? Those
Yeah, they do.
tentacle
It's
looking
like a
things.
yeah, it's like a cross between a Imperial probe droid and something from the Matrix.
octopus of some sort.
Yeah.
So those are those. We mentioned Porter Ingle saving Bell here.
Portly Ingle.
Portly Ingle. He's a little bit bigger, but I said, it's that joke of like, hey, do you want a skinny chef or do you want one on the heavier side? Because the heavier side presumably has better food. So, and not that I believe that. That's just one of those funny things people talk about. So there's some other drawings that are out there of Porter
I
Ingle.
also don't expect to see him smiling.
Yeah,
ever.
exactly. Before we get into the calm before the storm, I guess the last thing on the Battle of Cyclor, because it is related, is just this chapter. I believe it's chapter 13, where Bell touches death, like he's on death's door, and the Force, he can feel it calling to him and telling him just to let go and to be one with the Force, right? The cosmic force is trying to pull him in because he's just about ready to die. I really thought he was going to go. I really did. And I thought, wow, this is Cavan Scott giving us a lot of insight into what that experience is like for Jedi. And it was interesting, I guess, a couple things. Number one, we never got the sense that he knew anything about converting to a Force ghost, and I wouldn't expect him of anybody, right? I mean, this is a debate that people are already having about whether or not the Jedi during this time know that ability. I would say no, because Yoda doesn't have it and isn't learning it till a little bit later, until Qui-Gon teaches him. But
I thought there were actually, I saw some instances where I think they do.
Really,
but yeah, we can debate.
Maybe
Yoda
time, doesn't know. We'll get that.
Right? Yeah, I think Yoda might not know at this point, but yeah,
there's but yeah, I mean, he's really very close to it. And the only thing that's kind of keeping him going is, the thought of his master being out there, and really Ember. Like there was a huge emphasis on Ember constantly barking and keeping that pulse alive, allowing him to, get them into the innovator, and, they're cutting back and forth, and he can see people, and he doesn't recognize some people, like, Ingle and all that. He's just kind of going through it all. It was a very, very cool chapter. Very different than anything. And I can't think of anything that's ever been given to us in Star Wars where we got to see that, I'm almost positive the Jedi going through death and experiencing death and what that would look like. But I really thought he was going to pass. And if he did, I wondered, like, okay, well then what are they going to do with this character? Because they'd played him up to be such an important role. Thankfully, in the same chapter, right, they get the mask on him and they dump him in the bacta tank, and, he comes back, he gets through it all. But very, very interesting to kind of see what that experience was like for him, and very real. Like there was, a character that I didn't, again, he's one of the characters that I'm still on the fence with. Like, I know that probably shocks people. I haven't really found that he's interesting, but he's not like one of my top tier characters yet. But it was still, at the same time, I felt vested in him, and having him go through this was kind of real. It was a little shocking for me.
Right. I mean, he's when you take, like, it's like him and Vernestra are probably two of the truly up and coming pride of the orders. And I think he's just starting to get known, which is making him more interesting, because I think until he's injured, a lot of the masters didn't really know who he was.
Yeah, Stellan didn't even know who he was.
Yeah, exactly. But now they're starting to see, and now he's got a different place in the order than he did previously. But I wasn't really concerned that he was going to die. It was pretty traumatic, though, that he was so severely wounded, though, to where it made you at least consider it for a minute. Mm-hmm. Because again, I think, we're too invested in that character for him to go that quickly at the beginning of a book. But again, we talked about this in Discord a week or so ago, that we were talking about kind of the Death Watch type of thing, and then in the High Republic, and what's it going to take for things to start to unravel. And you and I were talking with some folks about debating about what that's going to be. Is it going to be more of a master, or is it going to be more of a student that's going to have to die for something to really have the wheels start to come off more than they already have in some respect? But
yeah, I mean,
but I'm glad he's still with us. He's a good character.
Yeah, I wish I could say the same about Loden, but like he was a character that I felt like was another one that Scott or Soul did a really good job of. You're very relatable. We like him. He was funny, and I think that was the big shocker at the very end, obviously, of that book. And then to have him come back in this novel was like, oh man, you're just cheering for the fact that they were together, especially the condition and the state that Loden was in, and then to lose him was just it was shocking. It was pretty
well, and the confusion with his discussion. Yeah, and we'll get to it, but yeah.
We'll talk about the weight of that here a little bit.
I feel a little gypped on Loden still. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
We'll get
too soon, too fast, too soon, kind of thing.
Too soon. Yep.
The other images that I had in here, just to kind of go back, so this was what I was supposed to throw up when we were talking about York taking that mission over to Valo. This is official artwork, so that's her heading out there, and then that's her actually showing up with. I think that's is it iridium or whatever that toxic mineral is or something, or is that the device itself? I forget now. But that's Tatooine. So the Sullustan that is kind of a pain in the crawl on everybody's side on the Senate, which we were having a conversation, I think, before we came on board, or maybe it was the beginning of the show. I don't know. It's already been an hour. But we were talking about whether or not he was, in the right. Is he wrong? Is he just, all that? We'll come to him in a little bit, but that's what he looks like. He looks as slimy as you would expect him to look. Although I think he's a good guy. He's just got a different viewpoint.
He means
well.
Well,
he really does.
He thinks he does.
I hate that patronizing.
I mean well, Master Jedi.
All right. Excuse me. So this is Valo, again, official artwork here, but this is where the Republic Fair is going to take place. We talked about her message, I guess Lena So's message, and what she was trying to do already. I kind of jumped the gun on that one. But I think one of the interesting characters that's introduced here is Samurain. This is the lady that's in charge of the coordinator. She's basically the wedding planner, if you will, right? The event organizer of this entire thing. And
Samira is pretty impressive too. She's got her stuff together.
Yeah, she does. Like from a project management perspective, like you can really appreciate what she's doing here. I think they make a note of that too. Like he calls that out of something about how she's just on top of her game all the time. So I just took it at face value. I was like, yeah, good. We need more people like that in our world. But there's this is a high profile event. They've got cameras that are going to be there. Everything's going to be on display. I mean, they're going all out with all of this, with the Republic Fair. In attendance, they've invited just about every system that's part of the Republic and more, like the Togrutas, who they've invited as well to come out here, which was interesting because I didn't realize they were not part of the Republic at this point. Of course, that changes towards the very end. At least there's an alliance that's formed. But there's some debate that goes back and forth on who should be protecting Lena So and who should be protecting the, what's her name? Regassa. I could scroll down.
We just call it the Regassa.
The Regassa. So the matriarch of the Togrutas, right? There was a lot of debate about who was going to be guarding her, who was going to be the personal Jedi that was assigned. And there was, talk of Avar Kriss. Elzar Mann was not on anybody's radar that I remember. I think Porter Engle was the one that was kind of everybody was bringing up because he'd been around for so long, and
but he's not a diplomat whatsoever.
Right? No, he's not. But
there was some bad blood that Avar wasn't at this either. Too, they really thought it was a bad form
that she didn't show up.
That Avar was doing other things.
Well, and I think that's up for debate too. Like I really think they're going to get into that in the comics going forward. Especially, we already saw kind of inklings of that when we talked about earlier between her and Stellan. But I think there is an argument to be made. It's like, okay, what would this have been like had Avar Kriss been there? Like their number one problem, if you really boil it down, pull everything back, their number one problem during the Battle of Valo was communication. All right, they've been cut off externally, internally, everything was completely shut down. There was the war cloud that was going on, and then they had the wreck punk that was blasting out of the speakers and everything else. I mean, they did everything to dull the senses of the Jedi and anybody in attendance, and just cut off all communications. And if you lose communications, it can only mean one thing, right? Thank you. All right. Thank you. But yeah, so they did enough there to cut the communications off. But then you got to wonder, okay, so what is Avar Kriss? What do we know her for outside of, we know her for a number of things, but primarily we know her that she was one that can pull everybody together and be this one collective unit that can see and feel. And we saw that in play twice during Light of the Jedi. So, would things have been different? I think the answer is yes. And I think a lot of people are looking at this are going to reflect back on the Battle of Valo and say, hey, this would have been different had you shown up. And you didn't. And so that, does she bear that responsibility? Is she going to bear that responsibility? Are people going to hold her accountable for that? On the same time, they had their best person out there fighting a bigger battle, right? If we take it from what they tell us, there were a lot of worlds that were completely consumed, is the word they used, by the Drengir. So this wasn't a small threat. This wasn't a minor thing. She wasn't out, lollygagging out there doing whatever. I mean, she was doing a lot, and we see that in the comics. We don't in the books, so you just kind of have to go look at the comics. But yeah, it was a real threat. It was a relevant threat. It was a distraction. But I don't know. Do you think she's going to put that burden of responsibility on her in any way? It didn't seem like it, at least in the first comic. But I wonder if that's going to creep up a little bit later.
I think we get some there's some dissension, I think, between her and Stellan. I think there's disagreement in general about where their resources should be redirected. And I think between Avar and even the Republic, I think there's still some disagreement about what is more serious. But again, the Republic can't figure out what's more serious. You got Tian Toon, what he believes that they should be doing, and what Lena So believes, and whatever the rest of the galaxy thinks that they should be doing. So I think it's one of these things of you can always second guess it after the fact. The Drengir were a serious enough threat, and we've seen this in the other material that they had to get it under control because it was consuming the galaxy. Like you said, it was so widespread. It was on so many different worlds that they had to do something. And who else are you going to be able to do it? And it was so important for Chris because the other thing could be true though too. In the comics, if Avar Chris wasn't there, they wouldn't have been able to put the progenitor to sleep, right? They wouldn't be able to
That's very
encapsulate
true. Yep.
and control it. As the only way they were able to do it was between Keeve and Avar. I mean, the other Jedi there
Sure,
too, of
sure.
course, made a big deal,
Yeah.
but the abilities of Avar helped control that threat.
Mhm.
And it sucks, but there's only one Avar
Yep.
Chris. There's only one person who can do this, and she can't be everywhere. And she had to make the call that she thought was best. And again, no one knew that this was going to happen on Valo. It was a little short-sighted to not think that something may happen, but you make the decision you have with the material, with the information you have, and you just kind of move forward. But I'm sure there will be some of that, but I think they've kind of already resolved that part of the arc though, because I think with T and Toon, where he was going a little bit later, is that the reason why he wants the Republic to be able to defend itself is because you can't rely on the Jedi.
Right. It prove
What
Yeah.
happens if the Jedi? I mean, this is the whole leveler aspect of it too, right? We know where this is all
Mhm.
going, because if the Jedi aren't there, the Republic has to be able to defend itself. And he's very clear. Thank goodness for the Jedi that they're here,
Sure.
that they do this service for us, and that they're so loyal, and we appreciate that. But we can't take advantage of that forever because what if they're not here? Of course, we already know the answer to that too. Several hundred years later, when the Jedi aren't around,
Yep.
we know exactly what
Yeah.
happens, but different set of circumstances, I suppose.
Yeah, I think what we've been saying with maybe off the show is just that Tiatune's not wrong. Where he's coming
Right.
from and what he wants, it makes sense. It makes complete sense. And it's just going to be a matter of whether or not the Republic and or the Jedi see it and want to come figure out what they want to do about it. I think a little bit later, and not to spoil anything too much, but in Tempest Runner, they do make mention of a force that's been set up, and I don't know. We'll probably get more in the comics. I think they're going to start touching on it, but it does sound like something has started. Maybe not.
There's a coalition of
Yeah,
something,
exactly. These
but yeah, to me, it sounds like it's still one of these, like the Coruscant security, type of thing. But yeah, there does appear to be
like a
some sort
militia of
of
some sort.
a lot. Yeah, yeah, like a rough alliance between worlds that they do have a way to respond to some things, but it doesn't sound like they've actually got what do they keep calling the DFP,
Yeah, defense coalition or no
Defense Force Program or something like
Republic
that.
Defense. Oh shoot! It's been
Yeah,
3 months,
DF
man. But
something.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, I think it's the DFP or something along those
yeah.
lines. But anyway, it's a defense. The Republic would have an actual army, effectively, or a
Yeah.
military to be able to handle their own business.
Not like the United Nations
But
kind of thing, right? Where they get people that come together and defend, supposedly.
right, maybe more effective.
Yeah, not to.
Maybe.
Conceptually, that's on top of not in real
Right,
world
right.
application or practically. No, not that at all. This is really cool. This is what we've got. We're showing the Spirit of Unity, the Republic Fair. This is official work. It says Chancellor So invites you to Valo, the Republic Fair, Spirit of Unity, and it's kind of like a poster that you would see plastered
Yeah.
everywhere.
Oh, and I absolutely love that they have like a theme song for the whole event, which to me just screamed it's
Small
a small
world.
world.
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
Ugh.
so somebody, I can't remember, on Twitter, somebody brought it up, and I think he did confirm that was what he was going for. And you cannot read that and not think it's a small world after all, playing the entire time.
Oh, Mark Thompson sings it
Oh, does he
on the audiobook.
Oh my goodness, I got to listen to that.
It is glorious.
Yeah. But I guess he was trying to evoke those kind of feelings and that the thought of all that. So
I could just imagine what that was like to record that and how hard he must have been laughing after.
when I think at one point too during this book, isn't it just like constantly on play while the battle's going on, or and then before the wreck punk starts kicking in? Like, you imagine sitting there doing that. But yeah, this is Tawan says it's propaganda at its best. Yeah, probably it is propaganda, some form of propaganda. Let's talk about just quickly the Republic Fair itself. It is, they're celebrating science and innovation, the arts, cuisine. They've got these, I'm going to call them floating dioramas, but they're basically these floating islands. You can kind of see them here in the picture, these saucer type things.
They're fantastic.
And they've taken a total of 42 islands, which, by the way, I've confirmed with the man himself, Mr. Scott, that 42 reference and some of the other 42 references in the book and his comics are all direct references to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So anybody that's read that book or knows the number of 42 as being the answer to everything, he's a huge fan of the book, and he keeps throwing that number 42 in there. So every time you see it, just think Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's where it's coming from. But 42 Sky Islands, and they've got basically they've recreated the environment of these 42 places within the Republic. And cool, it's kind of cool. Like you can float around to each one of them, right? And kind of experience, oh, what is it like to be on Alderaan? And what's it like to be on Nal Hutta? Or no, that they're not in the Republic. I'm just kidding. But different regions or planets or whatever, right? I put in here, they've got Rykrit wraps. It's funny that he got into the food. So you can get Bantha milkshakes. They've got Rykrit wraps. Like I guess it's a sausage wrap of some sort. Maybe it's in my head. It's what it is. And they got petting zoos, which I thought was really cool. And then they described one of the animals in the zoo, and I thought that's not an animal I want to pet. What is the Hygrath or the Hagrith or whatever it was with all the teeth and searing thing.
Of course, it gets loose later.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, right. Exactly. Now that chapter opens.
It was very Jurassic Park.
Yeah, that chapter opens with him looking at that thing, talking about it, and you're like, holy crap, that thing is going to get out and just tear people apart. And yeah, it does. And in fact, it eats. What's her name? Mantessa?
Yeah, Mantessa.
Yeah, it eats her, like her, and she's the mom of one of the characters later.
She annoyed me.
Yeah, she did. I'm glad they ate her.
She was not a good person.
They ate her. Oh, let's see. So,
but yeah, this was fantastic. I mean, this was really cool, dude. The whole concept of it, of being able to fly from, at least they have these pods that take you, and then the pods are also decorated in the style and the culture. It's just supposed to immerse you. And again, the idea is that everybody can experience everything that the Republic has to offer. You can understand just how wonderful and how different and just how unique they're in a position they are, that they can have so many different representations of it all and be able to experience in one place. Now, the side effect of this is that this is a rich people's event, right? Which is Toon's problem, because they have dumped a ton of money into this thing, and only a fraction of the galaxy can really enjoy it. But of course, they're gonna holonet it all. They're gonna virtual, everybody's gonna zoom in, basically, right? Right. Yeah, they're gonna live stream this whole thing, which is not quite the same whenever you spend all this money to do it. But it was the idea behind it, though, was actually very cool, and I thought it was actually not a terrible event. It's very much like a state fair.
Yeah, that's
right?
exactly
that
what
type
it is.
of thing,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, or like the World's Fair,
There
like
you
what
go.
the World's Fair was way back when.
Mhm.
It's the very same concept, and I think the idea behind it was very good. But it was also, when Samira would talk, the fine delicacies, she sounded like she had an Irish accent in this, but yeah, you had all of these fine cuisines and all of this, but you could just start to tell it was very hoity-toity in a lot of different ways. Yeah, it was there was definitely some very posh moments to it all.
Steph asked, "What's it like to be on Tatooine?" That was the one disc or whatever.
They're not in the Republic yet.
No, I was going to say, if it was, it's just sand. I mean, what were they going to? I don't know. Maybe they got a baby Sarlacc pit or something that you could go visit and see.
Maybe they would have a baby crate dragon in the petting zoo.
It was just as exciting as the Hoth planet, the Hoth floating one. So, just,
right,
complete extremes.
With a pet wampa to pet.
Yep. So I guess the other takeaway is, we talked about her already, but Samira, who is the event organizer, her and Elzar Mann, there's some chemistry there, right? I mean, they're feeling the heat, and he's wanting a little bit more, and she's kind of saying no, and they eventually hook up. I mean, he sleeps with her literally, more than just sleeps. They and not only that,
described how naked he was.
But which is probably not shocking now for us, right? Because maybe not. If you've been following this series, search, it's probably not that big of a shocker. But if you read Master and Apprentice, this is like, okay, not a big deal. Of course, Anakin did it, but that was really taboo at that point. But the fact that it felt like he is out there just doing this whenever he can. Like, that's how he's dealing with a lot of stuff too. Like you said, he feels like a very troubled person. And and not really, and kind of throwing caution to the wind, or really just kind of giving into his feelings and emotions whenever he wants to help him feel better, right? Almost selfishly doing this. And I think it really it does. I think it burns him in this one, because the next day is the day. So after they have this night of passion, the very next day is the day that the Battle of Aloe starts, the very first day. And he wakes up and she's gone. Like, she totally just left. And it meant it.
She's got a job to do, man.
Well, she does. But I mean, she even talks about it. Like, you get the sense that, okay, I think he tried to call her and, was saying, hey, did it not mean anything to you? And she's like, no, I'm sorry. I've got to get to work, and you're a Jedi and I'm this, organizer person. And what did you think was going to happen? Like, yeah, we did it, but that was fun. Yeah. Good luck. We'll see you next time, kind of thing. And I think that burns him, because I think he is a very emotional character, right? He's somebody who probably had that and felt like, oh, okay, there's something more here. And yeah, she didn't want any part of it. So
I think it's funny because this is kind of real life too. We're conditioned to where the guy is the one who bails on the girl after a one night stand, effectively. And so when it's the other way around, the guy's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, this is not how this is supposed to work.
Yeah.
I'm the one who's supposed to let you down easy. And now that you're the one doing it to me, I don't know what to do with myself. This is not cool.
Yep.
You can't do this. But Samira's got her. I mean, she knows what she wants. They were flirty, and God, I mean, Cavan Scott talked about her neckline. I couldn't tell you how many times.
It was getting a little.
Even I was starting to have to be a little.
Get some water. Yeah, I got steamy there for a little while. Just some of the stuff that he said. So, and now, of course, if you haven't read the book, they didn't get into any details. Don't worry, there was nothing like that. That's not where Star Wars went. But it did go at least to the point.
Albert's fan fiction.
Yeah. Now, if you visit over on my archive of our own, there's plenty of
Albert loves Avon. Avon. Albert loves Avon. Avar.
I do love Avon. They make some pretty good products.
How true. They do. They used to make some cool stuff back in the day.
All right, let's get into
like beer steins and all sorts of stuff. It's great.
Let's get into the Battle of Aloe. Tuan asked, no Fabio cameo. No, there was not a Fabio cameo. Although I bet someone needs to make like a Fabio looking cover for the Rising Storm, right? Where it's just Elzar Mann holding. I'm going to post that and see what happens.
Riding a dragon. Like it just muscles bulging, the shirt pulled open.
Oh, there's the Photoshop coming. I thank you, Tuan, for the inspiration.
We gave Albert a project for the evening.
That's exactly what's going to happen. Just wait. I'm going to take a romance novel and I'll put the same logo at the top, the Rising Storm at the bottom.
Oh, no, you got to put your face.
No. It's going to be
your face on the Fabio body riding a dragon with Elzar's lightsaber.
No, that's not going to happen. It'll be Elzar Mann, but then we'll tag Cavan Scott and see what he says.
You do it tonight and Tuan will fix it tomorrow. It's great.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's get into the Battle of Aloe, and it starts with a diversion. They've got basically it's the day of the festival starting and the fair starting, and they've got a line of ships that are waiting to come in. Right. They figure like a long line of cars waiting to kind of land on the planet, if you will. And there's an explosion on one of them, which I think it was one of the shuttles. I think it said it had dancers. Not that it matters, but at first everyone's kind of shocked, and they're taken back by the fact that this happened. They don't really make a big deal about it either. But then suddenly out of nowhere, there's all these ships. I mean, he says dozens upon dozens of these ships come out of hyperspace in the orbit. And again, in this process, as they're coming out, they're disintegrating a lot of these ships that are sitting there waiting to kind of come in. And we've seen that we see that as an impact. It's happened before, but I think it's important to note that using the paths to come into orbit like that causes ships to explode. There's some science behind it, some Star Wars science or physics behind it, but that in itself caused a whole bunch of other ships to explode. So suddenly this whole sky is lit up with several explosions happening and all these ships starting to appear. They began to attack immediately. The Innovator's now there, the same ship that Bell was on earlier. Bell's up to, I guess he's pretty good at this point. So I don't know how much time has passed, but it doesn't feel like I don't remember him ever feeling any ill effects of, getting a harpoon in his stomach at this point. So
they said that, I think he said he was still a little tender. He wasn't used to the synth flesh. So I think he was not quite 100%, but yeah, it seemed like he was pretty good for the most part, probably 90, 95%.
So, they bounce back real quick.
Yeah. But they were not letting any ships leave either. So anybody that tried to turn tail and leave, the Nihil were just blowing everything out of the sky.
Yeah.
Nothing survived. They disintegrated the outpost, the stations. everything.
Yeah, the plan was to cut off communications. So what they had Pan-Eta, who was in orbit, basically bombarding and attacking with the ships and everything from that perspective. They had Lorna D, who led the ground assault. So their first role, which wasn't in this book, it was in Race to Crash Point Tower, was cutting off the communications internally. And so they had sent out some of Lorna D's team out there to cut the communications off. So she was doing the ground level type stuff, and then Zetar, who's the new character that was introduced that took over. Um, oh, and I forgot his name now. The other guy, Kazov.
Kazov, yeah.
So he took Kazov's spot. That Zetar character is the only one. He's out, like you said, in the back, and he's just picking up anybody that's trying to flee. And so that it seems pretty effective. Like, I mean, like seems like they got all their bases covered. On top of that, they drop down the war cloud, which is the poisonous, noxious gas all over the world, all over this fair. And they start throwing this wreck punk. It was brought up in Light of the Jedi, but this just whatever this music sounds like, and there's a soundtrack they're trying to work on right now. Believe it or not, they're trying to get people to put forth. Daniel Jose Older steps chimed in on it, as well as Cavan Scott, about how there's something going on. I don't know what that's going to be, if it's going to be official or they're going to make it up, but they're doing something. But they start blasting this throughout the entire fair as well. And so what this does is it really jacks with everybody's senses, including the Jedi, right? They're hearing all this noise coming out of the speakers. They've got the noxious gas that's all over the place that's putting people down, and the Jedi are having to struggle with that as well. And then you've got the aerial battles going on, and should anybody escape, they're going to get hit by Zetar out there as well. One thing on the gas, though, just quickly, Stellan Geos makes that comment about how he wonders why the rebreathers aren't standard issue at this point, which I think was a great point. Like, you know, if you've been fighting this war for a year now, and that is their tactic, their number one tactic is they start off with that gas and they wear the masks. How would the Jedi at this point not been giving rebreathers? Is this part of the hubris thing? And I just think of that scene in the Phantom Menace where, you know, they hold their breath when that smoke comes in, right? But then later on, when they go down into the Gungan city and underwater, they have the rebreathers. And I thought, okay, well, maybe that is kind of standard issue. And as a result of this war and what the Nihil did, it became standard issue for the Jedi by the time we get to the prequel trilogy. Maybe. But tactically, I think everything was pretty sound. I think they had a pretty good plan here. It was interesting too that the Nihil were there to destroy and not loot. Like, I took that note down, and this is all part of Markion Ro's plan. He's not looking for anything here other than just to pounce him. And I don't know, I can't remember the context whether or not somebody like Pan or Lorna D knew that their whole point was not to loot, because I think they were looting. But from Markion Ro's perspective, it was really just to cause as much damage and, you know, tyranny as they could.
Yeah, I think to understand a little bit better, we got to back up a little bit. So the Cycler shipyards was sanctioned by Pan, executed by his Tempest, kind of on a rogue mission, and they failed. Right, it did not go well. And when he came back, Ro was pissed, right, and basically tries to kill Pan, and tries to get Pan in line. He hands him his helmet. He, you know, gets shocked and he can't let go of it, and he rips it open anyway. So they're trying to double cross Ro of sorts now, and they're trying to pool their resources together. But Ro takes control of the situation by basically creating the chant. I mean, he basically gets everybody energized, and basically it comes to, you know, death to the Chancellor, death to So.
Mm-hmm.
And they just keep chanting this. So the whole mission at this point now is to destroy and kill Chancellor So, because if they can kill her and they can do all this damage to the fair, the Republic will be lost. It's the whole idea of, you know, cutting off the head of the leadership and they'll flounder.
Mm-hmm.
And Lena So is the symbol of the Republic. She is that shining light. She is what everybody loves her, right? That even though she's got, you know, people who, you know, argue against her, the people absolutely love her, and everyone knows that. And so that kind of helped set the stage as to why of what they're doing and what some of the things we're going to see here about why, like, what's her name, Lorna takes some chances that she does a little bit later on. It's with the explicit purpose to make sure that So does not make it out of this alive.
Yeah, no, and I'm sorry. I'm glad you brought that up, because I completely walk right over that. But yes, that's was the intent. Taking her on. I'm throwing some images up now. Again, all this is
Yeah, and
official artwork. These have been
these are the great ones. Yeah.
we've used those, or they've used them several times now. We'll get to that one here, but the other ones I glossed over here. Let's see if I can go back to them. This was interesting. Some of the smaller strike ships, I believe. I guess that's what those are.
Yeah, the Cyclorians. Yeah.
Yep. And then you've got the larger ones there as well. Boryaga is seen here in this image, and I don't remember him being on the ground. I know he jumps into. He's part of the space battle, or the. He's part of the vectors that are flying around at some point, but whatever. I don't remember that.
Well, yeah, he takes damage and has to land.
Yeah, maybe that's where it was. Maybe this is after he lands. But yeah, and there's some pretty cool images there of like what the fair looked like. How.
What are these from?
So this is from the if you go watch the High Republic show, the most recent episode, and by recent I mean like 2 months ago now, because the next one's coming out here in just a few weeks. But at the very beginning, they do a really quick breakdown, quicker than an hour and 36 minutes, of the rising storm, and they are throwing up these images. And so these images were made for either for that little segment of the High Republic show, or these are some of the ones that are going to come up in the children's book that's got Boryaga in it, which I don't think comes out until October or something. It's still a while out. But the artwork looks very similar to the one that was done for the first wave, in which, by the way, both of them were done by Cavan Scott. So he wrote both of these kids' books, children books as well. So yeah, so there, all of this is going on. And Bell's on the innovator. I'll come back to that image here. And his story, like, again, I'm not trying to be mean or anything. I found it less interesting. Like, I love the fact that he was able to turn the force back on, realize what was going on. He was part of he was one of the very first people to scream wolf, that, hey, something's not right here, because he felt suddenly all of these felt a disturbance in the force because the Nihil were about to invade. But I guess the long story for him, and during the Battle of Valos, he has been assigned, and I forget if it was a direct order or he just took it upon himself, but Lena So's son is also here. He's like a teenager, young, maybe 15, 18, or somewhere around that age. That's kind of where I put him, but he's also here, and he is, I guess I'm going to call him, courting another kid, and I forget his name.
Yeah, the mayor's son.
The mayor's son. It was Kim and I have it somewhere down here in the notes. I forgot his name already, but he was trying to make Jom. That's who it was. Kim and
Jom.
Right.
There you go. I want to say Ron, but I was like, that's not right. Yeah, Jom.
So these two boys obviously have something for each other, and they're kind of, they're out on the innovator, and they're trying to get away and
sneak it off.
Yeah, just be kids, right? And his Bell is kind of there to help protect him and to make sure that, it's the chancellor's son and the mayor's son, so he's going to take it upon himself. What ends up happening is they get stuck in the innovator, and there's some great moments in here, I think, where he really does shine. And he does, again, a very good, it's almost like a very Titanic kind of situation where they sink the innovator, it falls into the water, it starts taking in a bunch of water, and the entire time they're trying to get out of the innovator in some way. While this thing is filling up, they meet another character. I forget what his name was now. Didn't speak anything. And then we got the words pew, pew, pew. Do you remember that in the book? Yeah. Where that's now canonized? Yeah. Pew, pew, pew.
Pew, pew.
But yeah, he gets to, demonstrate his force abilities. But I think this is where I think for a lot of people, it felt like Bell is destined to be more than what we've seen. Like, he is going to really be a big character. And he's relatable because he's very practical. He seems like he's very rooted, very down to earth. He's not like a Stellan Geos. He doesn't have the worry. I wouldn't say worrying. That's not a word. Wayfaring ways of Elzar Mann. Right. He's not the pristine, symbol of the Jedi Order that Avar Kriss is. He just feels like a very good Jedi, well-rounded Jedi, and I think that's why people resonate with him. And it's during all of this this whole scene with him and what he's going through what links he goes through to protect Kim and Jom, that a lot of that really kind of bubbles up and surfaces for him.
Right. Yeah, he's just trying to do the right thing and save these people. And I threw Steph's comment up there on the screen. Yeah, he just kind of took the assignment whenever they recognized that they had disappeared.
Yep.
And he had promised to the chancellor that she would find her kid.
Yep. There's Ram as well. I'm gonna just throw a couple images. We won't really speak to them because this is pulled from Race to Crash Point Tower, but there's Ram there, always looking a little dirty, grungy.
Mhm.
This is the Crash Point Tower. So this is the communications tower. This is after I believe it gets restored here. They were also planting Drengir seeds. I think that was part of their plan. That got squashed as well. Um, Here's another one. So this is from the Free Comic Book Day issue that went out, I guess, a couple weeks ago. There was a bit in here where they cut away, and this is where we got the visuals from the scavenger droids. And I'll come back to another image a little bit later because there's so much going on in Valo, right? There's all these different things, and it's very Star Warsy where you've got multiple fronts that are kind of happening. You're bouncing back and forth. Um, but the one thing, let's touch on something here, and I don't have a visual for it, but I want to talk about Elzar Mann specifically. Sorry, that's a little blurry. I didn't even see the resolution on that one. But Elzar Mann and then Ty York, because they do come together here. And before they do, though, let's talk about Elzar Mann, because I think more than anything, he has a pretty significant a moment in this book where, like we mentioned earlier, he's got all this rage, emotion, everything you can think of been building up, all the torment that he's felt from the visions that he's not been able to break. He finally came out here thinking it was going to fix everything, and then he gets thrown in the midst of this battle, and he's witnessing all these horrific people or horrifying deaths, right? People falling off these platforms, and he finally just unleashes to the point where he takes one of these floating discs, right? Think about the size of this thing, channels the force, taps into the dark side, and takes it and starts wielding this thing as a weapon and just running through the Nihil ships. I mean, literally sending this thing through ships. And while on the surface, for those of us that have played, some of the video games and the powerful stuff, I can't think of somebody outside of like somebody like Ray, or I don't know that we've seen this level of power before. First and foremost,
Palpatine and Rise of Skywalker is about the only thing
exactly
comparable.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that
Outside of like Force Unleashed.
exactly, that's what I was saying. Like outside of Force Unleashed, I don't know that we've seen this, and so I've got a lot of questions around it. First off, and there's probably a whole debate and a whole discussion that we can have around just how powerful Elzar Mann became in this moment. It scares the crap out of me, first and foremost. But the fact that, one, he did that, two, the Jedi's view, at least Stellan's view right now, after it was over, like it didn't seem like it was a big deal. Like, I mean, it was. Don't get me wrong, it was. But they're like, hey, you know what? You admitted that you did something wrong, and we'll figure it out. We'll fix it. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Compare that to like Yoda and how protective and how cautionary he was towards Luke with, once you start down the path, the dark side path, wherever it will dominate your destiny. Again, was that line that Yoda gave because Elzar Mann tapped into the dark side to this level. And although we're all saying the right things and everybody's got a good feeling that we're going to pull it through and he's going to be just fine, that's really not the case. That eventually this is going to catch up with him, that his destiny has already been predetermined because he's tapped into the dark side to this extent. It wasn't even like a small thing, right? This is like, and the other thing, just for context, the Jedi at this time, which I think is another problem with them, because they're not perfect at all. But another problem with the Jedi at this time is they really value every single life. Like you cannot count the number of times that before a Jedi in any of the books, any of the comics, says out loud or thinks to themselves, I really don't want to do this, but I'm going to have to do it. And it's horrible that I just did it. I can't believe that I just did it. They really, really try to value every single life, whether they're Nihil or the Drengir, even the Drengir. Like there was they've made comments about, hey, these guys are living beings and they're plant things, and we're killing them. We hate that we're doing it, but we should. That's so different. And it's crazy that they think in those terms and how pure they try to be when we get to the Jedi that we know of in just about any other era, where they're like, yeah, no, some people are going to die, and that's just the way it goes. Mace Windu doesn't think this way. I guarantee you that.
Right. Yeah.
So I know I've been kind of going on there, but
when we get to some of the other characters like Imri and Buryaga, they're super sensitive too.
Yep.
Right. They feel every emotion, no matter the circumstances. And so it's very impactful for them as well. But I think with Elzar, on the other side of the coin, though, we'll give Elzar a little bit of credit here. After he goes down this path and he kind of stops himself and gets himself right, he really is, he knows that he's broken at this point. And he is effectively begging to Ty York to, I need someone to keep me grounded. And Ty is not evil by any stretch of the imagination. He knows this to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
and so they had a fight earlier on, right? And he took her lightsaber, and she was pissed, wanted it back. They were throwing her in jail, but anyway, so she got out at one point, and she came back to fight him for it, and he just handed it over after all of this happened and said, "I need, I'm going to give it to you, but I need your help. I can't do this alone. I need someone to basically keep him
Yeah.
honest and keep him grounded through this."
He didn't
because
trust himself.
He just, I can't trust myself now, right? And of course, she says no. It was like, "Sorry, bro," and just kind of walks off. But
She comes back.
man, but it was she did. She, as much as Tayoric wants to just leave everything to chance and to her little stones or whatever it is. Is that what they're called? The
Yeah, I
stones that
forget
she
what
rolls for
yeah.
chance.
She has them in the
Yeah.
monster at Temple Peak, but I don't think she's using them at this point. I think she's done using them because
It's the one time she didn't
yes,
use them. Yeah.
was doing all this.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, she uses these things to decide a job, whether she'll do it or not. And basically you just think Qui-Gon, but without the, influencing it all. But yeah, I mean, but at least it speaks to Elzar that he's aware. Like he has the self-awareness at least to be able to say, okay, I am messed up. I am I'm not doing the right thing. I don't know what to do. I need someone to do this. And Ty, for better or worse, she knows who she is, or she's at least got an idea of what she's not. And she's not, she's just kind of doing the things that she wants to do. And she kind of fits more of almost like a way seeker anyway,
Mhm.
with the way that they're kind of setting her up as. So I'm really curious about some of her backstory as well. Cause she had training clearly as a Padawan, but she has not been part of the Jedi for quite some time.
Yeah, I think they're gonna
Um,
expose all that, and they already did. Like in the first issue of Monster at Temple Peak, you get the flashbacks of
mhm,
her as a Padawan, and things seem like
right.
really great, and something's gonna happen. You know it's gonna happen, but yeah, there's definitely some background there for you.
Right.
Yeah, no,
But yeah, so for all the things that Elzar was doing, at least he has those kind of those redeeming qualities about him.
right. Then and just to kind of add on, so that really wasn't the most atrocious thing he did, in my opinion. Like the fact that he was floating that disc around and blowing ships out of the sky. It's like, okay, yeah, I mean, it's horrible because, again, from their perspective, this is a horrible thing because people are dying. But he goes
Right.
one step further. Like at some point, he says that he's going around and he's ripping masks off with the Force. No big deal. But then he's also ripping their arms off with the Force, like literally using telekinesis to rip their arms off. And there's a great quote in here. He says the Nihil are acting like animals, and like animals, they'd be put down. Which you hear that, and you cannot help but think of Anakin Skywalker and
Anakin.
Revenge of the Sith or Attack of the Clones, right? And
Right.
what he went through, and the way he described the Tusken Raiders, the Sand People, as being animals. But I mean, he didn't just. This is pretty horrible in terms of what he was doing. That he was using the Force as this way. So again, what freaking power level is this guy at? Like how much emotion is buried in there? And now, like I said, earlier when we first started this episode, and I mentioned that now it all makes sense to have him perceive the Force as a raging sea. Seas can be very calm, and they can be some of the most devastating things, natural disasters that can occur come from
Right.
storms and come from waves and tidal waves and all of that. So it's very appropriate that he sees the Force in this way. But yeah, I've got some questions around just how powerful he was, and is that normal? What's going on there?
Yeah. But it starts. I mean, but the thing is, with this, uh, with him and Ty connecting in a certain way, it has definitely given him someone now to see where, I don't know. He doesn't understand what her path is or what it is, but he has someone now to kind of look to and banter a bit with. But again, we already see some of the signs of him connecting in some way with her that's probably going to get him in trouble at some point again, because he just can't help himself.
Yeah, well, they did this, and so let's on that note, they do when they come together and she helps them. They eventually come across these animals. They're dragons, right? They're called sand voles. They're dragons in every sense, and I've got a picture we'll show you here in just a second. But that is an official piece of artwork. But they make this like force connection, force bond, which is really interesting because not only did
It's
they
very intimate too.
very
Yeah.
intimate, exactly. Like they were
Yeah.
able to see each other's paths and things that they had done. So she's aware that her and Avar, Chris, and him had hooked up at some point, or did I don't know? They maybe kissed or whatever because they did when they were Padawans.
She had the unfiltered version, it sounds
Yep,
like.
yep. She got to see a lot of that, and
Yep.
vice versa. He got to see a part of her, and see her past. And he mentions there's a couple things in there, but they're all kind of like, ooh, wonder what that is. And we probably know later on down the road, something that really stands out just now for us. But that is an interesting power that they do that. I mean, it's kind of like we get when they do it with the animal affinity kind of thing.
Mhm.
And it's really what they did. They did it with each other first. Then they did it with the Sandvals as well. So they were almost like this unified. All four of them were kind of connected by the Force, and they saw each other very differently afterwards, which I think is what you mentioned earlier. That's
Right.
gonna be very interesting to see where that goes. And on one level, you almost got the sense that man was kind of, again, probably because who he is, saw it as a very intimate relationship kind of thing. And she was like, no, dude, you're not even my type, which I thought was very funny as well. Cause again, he's getting shut down by somebody 2 times in one book. Uh, but yeah, just that force bond. I wonder what that's going to have, what that's going to be like for them a little bit later. The image that I've got up now is that Sandval. It looks like a freaking blue dragon right out of Dungeons and Dragons. Like it looks
Yep.
exactly like that, which is really awesome. There's a great line in there. So eventually they get on these Sandvals and they head to the sky and they start attacking ships while riding these animals. And there's that one line in there, and I'm paraphrasing, but it says, it says something about man is riding a dragon and attacking ships because why else would it be anybody? Why would it be anybody else but
Yeah.
man that does this? So that's really cool that we're getting that context, and we're going to get to see some of these more of his unorthodox type of abilities and tactics. But really cool stuff that they were out there flying around killing these scav droids. I mean, these dragons were biting ships and breaking off wings and doing all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, dragons in Star Wars, it's kind of a thing, right?
That's right.
Those are the Sandvils there. Before we get into Stellan Geos, is there anything else? Oh, we didn't talk about Porter Ingle, right? Surfboarding the Vectors. Um,
Yeah, that was
what'd you think
I
about
think this
that?
kind of goes to your yeah, and this kind of goes to your point earlier where they're out there saving everybody. So when they've got Nihil and everybody falling in space and crashing and blowing up these ships and whatnot, the Jedi are still out there trying to catch everybody. I forgot what exactly had blown up or had started dumping
It
people
was one
out
of the things that
and
tipped over and people were falling off, and they
okay,
were
but
using the
but even
Force.
Nihil, yeah, but even Nihil were in there, I
Yeah,
think,
they
as
were
well,
saving
because
them.
yeah, and they were sitting there yelling obscenities at him the entire time while they're on the hood of the car, basically, for visual. But yeah, I mean, they were still trying to save each and every one of them as best they could. But yeah, you've got Porter Engle out there basically doing not Marty McFly, a Teen Wolf on top of the van surfing.
Nobody's gonna get that
I knew you'd like
reference. No
that
one's
one.
gonna get that reference. Yeah, he's on the blue.
Oh,
He's on
come
the
on,
blue
people know
van.
what Teen Wolf
No, they
is.
don't. Not well. Maybe they do. Maybe our audience does. But yeah, he does that. They call it unified meditation, is what the official term was that he used.
Oh, okay,
And it basically he's essentially doing what Avar Chris did, right? She
right.
pulled everybody
See, she's
together.
not so special.
Yeah, they got more than one. And we probably failed to mention it, but the communications were restored. Well, no, it's coming up here in just a little bit. Sorry, we'll get to the communications piece.
Right.
But yeah, I guess the tragedy here is they lose Mikkel. I think he was what was his race? He was oh dang it, Duratar? Maybe not. I don't know.
I can't remember him.
Duros. I think he's a Duros, not Duratar. That's a place. I think it's Duros. Anyways, but they lose Mikkel in all of this, so there was a casualty here from that perspective. But yeah, I mean he's riding on that thing and they're floating around catching people, which is pretty interesting and kind of goes well with just how much this guy does and what he's been through. We're gonna get hopefully see even more of him later. Um, the we'll get to the communications piece. So just I guess quickly, Ram is able
That was
to.
actually one of my favorite scenes in the whole book.
Which was at the oh yeah. So Ram, yeah,
Or
I'll let you talk to it. Yes,
Oberlin,
I'll let you talk about it.
Oberlin and Laura.
So Ram restores internal communications, but also going on is you've got Oberlin and Rao or Rill or Rao. I don't know how they said her name.
Real, yeah.
We didn't really talk about her. She's kind of like the news reporter that's kind of been assigned to here. She's got this little droid, little cam droid that floats above her head, and
And she's got it somehow interfaced into her
yeah, almost
head.
like a Lobot kind of thing where she can.
Yeah, she's been given basically unfiltered access to the chancellor, and they're able to record most things and to be able to report all of this to the Republic or to spread it and to be able to show the entire Republic everything that goes on behind the scenes. They're trying to basically show transparency. amongst the Republic. So that's why she's there, and she gives all these interviews and whatnot.
Yep. But so Oberlin basically is with her and paired up with her. And if you don't know who Oberlin is, he's an Ugor, which is basically a slime, like being, if you will. He's like the first Jedi that's ever been of that race, or creature, I guess, or whatever. But he and Rill team up, and they go try to restore external communications. They're trying to get a signal outside to call for help while this is going on. And there's a great battle that happens with Oberlin versus Lorna D. That I know you were tickled by it, but what did you like most about it?
Well, yeah. So to give a quick, so when Elzar, if you remember, we were talking about before, where Elzar was excited that Avar was going to be landing on Valo, and she didn't know, and Stellan was trying to tell him wait, and then he was disappointed. Oberlin was the one who was actually there, and so he is the Jedi historian, I guess, of sorts, right? Archivist, right? So he has all of these artifacts, and he knows everything there is to know about all of these, and he loves to teach everyone and tell everyone about them. And so, but yeah, what made this conflict so interesting while they're trying to do this? So he's buying real time to keep working on the communications, and he is giving her a lesson on all of the artifacts as he's fighting Lorna D. And I think in some of her compatriots. And so it's just fantastic. All the coins, and you probably want to appreciate these things, but this is what all this means. And it's just listening. This is where the audiobook was fantastic, because you really get a sense of just the monotone type of thing. And this, like you said, this is like a slimy slug, or a slime in a spacesuit. You basically in a astronaut suit, if you will, for a visual, and just giving her a lesson in Jedi artifacts, like you would, like if you were in a museum. And it was just so perfect, because she's just like, do you ever shut up? And, and it was just so perfect, because he's just kicking her butt left and right while he's giving her an instruction. It was just fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, he does what Stellan Gios couldn't, although we'll come to that. Stellan was down a little bit.
Stellan got beaten around quite a bit.
But yeah, it ends with him finally just kind of blasting her, like literally using the force to like force push her, if I remember correctly, like out the roof, like through the ceiling,
through a wall or something.
Yeah, and then sends her flying, to which she lands a little bit later, like lands closer, honestly, to where the Chancellor's at. So, but yeah, it was a great little scene there, especially when he's using those coins. So like, I think he's floating them around and uses them as projectiles and all of that. So good stuff from Oberlin. There's a lot of people that really like him. I am one of them, and I'll just tell you right now, I'm trying to come up with I don't cosplay, but if there's anything that I would ever want to cosplay as, it's going to be Oberlin. So I'm looking into what it's going to cost. It's going to be expensive. So I thought it'd be cool.
That will be interesting.
It would be interesting. So now that they've got communications restored, we'll come back. We're going to get to Stellan here in a second, but now that we get communications restored, they're able to talk to one another. He checks in, all the Jedi report in, which is really cool. I mean, it's very dramatic and climactic as it's kind of building up. Finally, he hears that Vernestra Rose there, Ingle chimes in, Dira chimes in. I think they get Bell, who kind of chimes in at the very end, saying, hey, he's with Kim and Jom, and they're, on the Innovator or whatever. So, Stellan has an idea of they need to get rid of the cloud. Like, it's just too much of a problem. And so they all come together, use the Force, and they blow the cloud out, like completely clear it out. And that's when they realize, holy bananas, this is gone. This is bigger than we thought. There's people laying there dead everywhere. They can see the destruction now because the cloud's been lifted. But at the same time, they now expose themselves as well as the Nihil. So it's kind of a leveling, if you don't mind me using the term, levels a playing field there a little bit now that everybody can see each other, which is good. And from this point, I mean, Stellan throughout all of this he's battling Nihil left and right. He really gets into his biggest battle. He's kind of paired up with Maramis, who is he's like the head war guy for the Togrutas, right? He's in charge. He's like the right hand man or the personal guard of the Regasa there. Right. But then he's also paired up with Matari and Voru, who are the cats, the big cats that Lena So has as well. They're kind of doing their own thing, and he's sitting there battling different people in and out. There's a Trandoshan at some point that he gets the crap beat. I mean, this Trandoshan is not, a pushover. Really gets a crap beat out of him there.
Well, and the Nihil are like overstimming themselves too. They are so before you say, well, or before anybody thinks that the Jedi are pushovers, no, the Nihil are stimming themselves up. They are jacked up, and so they're like nigh unstoppable. Well, where they're charging after them, and they'll take a shot, but they don't feel it, and so they just keep on charging until basically they're dead.
Yep. It's like that quote, cocaine's a hell of a drug. They're
Yep.
but that's essentially what they're doing. They're hopped up on coke. They don't feel any of this pain, so they just keep coming at him. They're relentless in from that regard. And he's really got he bears the burden of responsibility of keeping Chancellor So and the Regassa protected. They're kind of together. And we won't get into the tactics. I mean, eventually they make their way up into a walker and they're safe from that perspective. But really, it boils down to him and having this really great battle with Lena, or not Lena So, Lorna D. Yeah, so Lorna
Yep.
D shows up and he gets his ass kicked. Sorry, excuse my language, but
Yeah. No, that's about the only way to put it.
by Lorna D, which I remember reading the book and thinking, okay, yeah, that seems like a little too much. I mean, you don't get the sense that she's really stemming. In fact, even later on, doesn't seem like that's her thing.
Right.
But now that we've got Tempest Runner, okay, you get the context, and now you understand how she was able to kind of fight. I don't want to ruin anything just yet, but you understand why she was able to put up a fight. She's a naturally gifted, talented fighter, and she's got a lot of training in her. And I don't think Stellan Gios at this point, like he'd been fighting off the gases, right? He's the entire time he's using the force to suppress gas. He's using the force to keep people from falling, using the force for all kinds of various things at any given time.
Fighting Nihil off left and
Yeah.
right.
I mean, he's getting taxed in terms of what he can actually do, what one single Jedi could actually do. And then he gets Lorna D as kind of like the last coup de grace. And, she really gives it to him. And just before, like, I think he takes a hilt, to his chin, throws him back. He's spitting blood. He's just, she's about to come down and kill him. And it's then and there that Elzar Mann kind of comes and jumps in there at the last minute. He jumps off his dragon, which is very Elzar Mannish to do, while it's flying, lands right there, and then, gets in the way and again channels the dark side. Like he's able to challenge it and force pushes Lorna D or whatever it is. Like he sends her off and he kind of interferes and intervenes, I guess, in that way. So it was, I guess the takeaway for Elzar Mann is he's really, really beat. And it ends with explosion. Like there's a big explosion from Pan's area. They feel like they're already starting to kind of lose this battle. It's not going the way they want it. So they just start carpet bombing everybody. It doesn't matter if the Nihil are down there or it
was part of the plan anyway. On their way out, they were just going to obliterate everything and then bail. But yeah, they started to sense the tide shifting.
Yeah, they were calling it pretty much at that point.
Right. Yeah. Lorna was supposed to kill the Chancellor, or her Tempest was supposed to kill the Chancellor, and then they were supposed to get off, and then they would just bomb everything else and then bail as the final insult. But Pan decides to go ahead and just start with them on the ground.
Yep. Which is pretty much what he would expect.
Didn't really make Lorna very happy.
Nope. What really kind of turned the tide was the arrival of the Togruta fleet. And again, it's another one of those Star Wars moments, right? There's a line that says ships arriving out of hyperspace, Tempest Runner. This is Chell, one of the guys on the ship there. Multiple signals, at least 20 so far. And then you get this very dramatic, attention all fighters. This is Trito Tamari of the Royal Togruta fleet. Enemy craft must disengage or be destroyed. This is your first and final warning. We show you no mercy. And Pan had no idea what this was. Like, is it the Jedi? Is it other forces? No one knew. They just suddenly came out of nowhere because, again, they're not really a part of the Alliance at this point. But this was what really turned the tide. And we come to find out it was really the fact that this was being broadcast and people were able to see it. And they saw Stellan Gios being everything the Jedi are supposed to be in terms of being a protector and protecting their queen, their matriarch, was enough for them to say, okay, we need to, this is not maybe the Republic of old, or maybe we have the wrong idea, or maybe this is a bigger threat. Whatever it was enough for them to finally say, we need to go in and show our support. We need to help them out. And that was enough for the Nihil to say, okay, this is not what we signed up for. We were not expecting this. They turned and ran, carpet bombed everybody. And it really ends this whole battle. It ends with Stellan Gios. The vision I had was him holding Lorna D, or not Lorna, holding Lena So, the Chancellor, right? And it's being broadcast. Everybody's witnessing this, but she's sitting there completely beaten. There's a lot of people wondering if she's dead. Kim runs up with her son runs up and he's crying. And then Stellan is the Jedi that cries, right? Everybody witnesses this on the holo. everybody sees Stellan Gios crying as he's sitting there holding Lena So, not understanding or not knowing what her fate was going to be. So in a very dramatic sense, it certainly ends on that note, but it was very powerful for the galaxy at large.
Right, and what happened was, I believe it was Lorna D got an explosive that she had thrown at the walker or something like that, and so they had taken a major hit regardless, and Lena So and the ambassador were together, the Regassa were together the entire time, and so they were helping each other throughout it, so the Regassa got to see Lena So very hands-on, caring for her people, getting her hands dirty, doing what she can to survive, but also understanding when, okay, it's time for us to try to keep the Regassa safe and take care of that relationship at the same time while helping as many people as they can along the way. But yeah, then she took a major hit. The Regassa was fine, but Lena So was very much less than fine. And yeah, made the Hollow News. What was her son's name? Kip?
Yeah, it was
Kip
Kip.
Kip or something like that.
Yeah, that was his short name, Kip, or Kim. Sorry, but I don't know what his full name. I can't remember his full name. Kim Paul. I'm making that up now. But yeah, I forgot to show. I was so enthralled in what we were talking about that I didn't even show some of the stuff here. This, of course, is from the out of print version cover of The Rising Storm, which you can see there. Her comically large axe, the clap, as it's called on Reddit, that she's wielding there. It's like a plasma axe, which, by the way, has its own Twitter account, and Cavan Scott is now following that Twitter account. So
He'll follow everything.
so it was kind of cool.
He even follows us.
There's yeah, this is a really great. When this was released prior to the book coming out, there's some pretty big spoilers in there, but not really. But I mean, you get the sense of what's going on. He's doing all these things here, right? And we didn't even talk about his former master's saber and doing the stuff that he was doing. He was exerting a lot of force abilities, though. There was Lorna D. This was Panita, if you haven't seen him. There's some concept art there, so credit to Darth Deacon for creating that one on the right-hand side. The one on the left, I don't think, is just a generic. What's his race?
Oh, he's a Doatin.
That's the one thing I'll say, too. Like, I love the fact that they've thrown, like, I'm fine. I'm doing pretty good now keeping up with the characters. Like, that's not a problem. What I struggle with now are the dang races. Like, they throw so many of them in all of the books they use, which is great because I think the sequel trilogy got a lot of flack for, oh, look, we don't see any of the old characters, any of the old races. It's all these new races. And every once in a while you'd see an old race, but I mean, by old, but man, they don't pull any punches. Like, it's everything from the prequel trilogy to sequel trilogy, all new races. It's all in there. And Scott keeps throwing these at you, like, and they're so bizarre. Like, some of these are from like the dang Droids cartoon. Like, there was one that's from the Droids cartoon. There was one that was from one issue of Star Wars Adventures that came out like 3 years ago, which is Zetar. That character, his race was used there and has never been used anywhere else.
Was it a Telpini?
Yeah, no, it's not Zetar. Sorry. Yeah, Zetar is a Telpini. Telpinis were in Rogue One. That's a little squatty looking thing that was on the gun, 50 caliber or whatever.
Oh yeah, right.
No, it was I forget which one. There was another character that was I wouldn't say showcased, but they said his name. But anyways, the point is it was from Star Wars Adventures, and it was issue like 6 from 3 years ago or whatever. So like, unless you read that comic, you had no idea what this thing looked like. So and here you are, Wikipedia out there looking to figure out what all these things look like. So they do a good job, I think, of mixing it up and showing lots of variances in terms of the races that are out there. Okay, and now I said it'd be an hour or 3, but yeah, that's where we are. Let's see. So Lorna D gets back to Lorna and Pan, they make their way back to Grizzle. So Grizzle was a base that was a rainy planet. It was a base that Ro had set up, and that's kind of where they've been laying low this entire time. And they get back, they kind of talk about it, and Ro's kind of like, hey, let's celebrate. Let's have revels like they've done before in the past. And both Dee and Pan want to go back out and attack. Like, they feel like this is the time to attack them when they're hurt, they're down. We've got the forces. Let's go out and hit them hard as fast as we can. And he confronts Ro about this. Well, I think Pan has really kind of had it at this point. I mean, he's certainly, Ro doesn't want to do it. He feels like he's weak and all this. And they get into, I guess for lack of a better term, Ro's just had enough. And he comes up and pulls out this little needle. I'm really kind of speeding through this because we're on hour 3. But he stabs Pan and hits him with this poison that what's that little dude at the very end? His little scientist guy's name. He came up with it. Not that it matters.
The butcher.
The butcher is always.
I think that's what I think that's his name. I can't remember what the doctor's name is.
Uttersound is his name. But Uttersound came up with this poison, this toxic poison that he stabs Pan with, that makes him fall to the ground, starts coughing. This all comes out a little bit later in Tempest Runner. Sorry if I'm spoiling that for you, but yeah, he's about to die, and Lorna D saves him. Of all things, it was pretty surprising that she saved him. And you're thinking, oh, she must really like him. No, she doesn't really like him. She's got her own plans. And so the way this ends for the Nihil is they decide that together they're going to go ahead and just attack the Cyclor shipyards. And the reason they got that was because they intercepted a message from, I think, Tatooine, right? This is a fake message that was sent out by the Republic, Stellan Gios's plan. They intercept that, and they hear that the Jedi are going to go back to, where was it? They were going to go Hetzel to support.
Yeah, they were going to go reinforce Hetzel. Yeah, the Republic finally wised up and were like, okay, they intercepted. Was it the Togrutas that intercepted the communication? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that they had finally recognized that the Nihil were tapping their communication, so they set them up.
Yep. So that's how they were able to kind of do all that. Well, she tells Pan, okay, look, they're going to head out to Hetzel, so why don't we go hit the Cyclor shipyard, or Cyclor itself, once again? And he's like, cool, see you there. Well, he heads out, and she doesn't show. And of course, he doesn't know this until later on when he shows up. And when he shows up at Cyclor, there is an entire fleet of the Republic ships there, and Jedi ships, Vectors, and Togrutas,
But wait, there's more. Yeah, then more come in behind.
Yeah, right. He gets completely surrounded by this, and that is pretty much the end of Pan's Tempest at that point, right?
He does manage to escape.
Yep. Yeah, but I mean, they really just pick him apart. I mean, it's horrible. It's a bloodbath, really. And he's cursing he's cursing Lorna D the entire time. He knows that something happened there, or at least he suspects something's going on there. He jumps into a shuttle escape pod that's got a pre-programmed path back to his home planet. And he takes off in the midst of everything going on. I mean, he's killing his own people. He doesn't even care. He's like punching people, killing people, trying to get to the escape pod, gets away, and then he shows up later on in Tempest Runner. But he is not in any good condition by the time he gets to Tempest Runner. Like he is dying, and he knows he's dying. So that's kind of where it ends for him. While this all is going on as well, there's a character named Amarant, and Amarant is a Nihil that was captured, and they come up with a plan that they're going to allow him to escape on a ship that has Bell and Adira on it as stowaways, and in hopes that he's going to leave and head back to wherever the Nihil base is, right? What they didn't expect was that Kelrin, so we talked earlier about
Claren,
is it Claren? Kelrin?
Claren.
Yeah. That there was a mother and a daughter that hired Ty Yorick, right, to escort him with that device, that nullifying laser device. And he ends up taking her, because remember, Matessa, the mom, got eaten by that whatever Hagra thing. And then this character named Amarant jumps into the ship, but he takes the daughter by accident. Like, it wasn't planned. This was not part of the plan. They were hoping that he would just jump in there and take off. Well, he ends up leaving and does go back to Grizzle like they expected. And then once they land on Grizzle, that's when Bell and Indira jump out of the ship. They then start the beacon. Right, they end up searching couldn't find any kind of beacon device or nothing like that. The Nihil do, and when they do that, that's when they call Elzar Mann out there, as well as a number of other ships to
Elzar does like a recon basically, and then calls in the rest of the fleet.
Yep. So that's kind of how we get to the. I know we kind of skipped a lot of. We're kind of blowing through some of this here at the very end, but the point is, they're Pan's out now. Lorna D is there on Grizzle as well as Marchion Row, and suddenly now the Republic and the Jedi know where their base is. So that's pretty significant. I mean, this is a pretty drastic change, and I would say, like, we've talked about this off air, but where the story's going, like some of the things that we were thinking were going to be long-lasting things and themes or story threads have not really turned out to be. Like, we're only in wave 2. The Drengir are gone, at least on hold for now. Marchion Row is, well, I don't want to spoil anything, but he's kind of falling out of power to some extent. He's gotten rid of all of his people. He's killing them off. I think that was part of his plan all along. However, I think that's starting to bite him in the butt now. You've got the Nihil they know where their base is at. They've been able to identify them already. They even have even Marchion Rose on their radar, though. At this point, the cool thing is they think Lorna D is in charge of the Nihil.
Right.
Like they suspect her to be like the kingpin leader of all of this, which works in Rose's favor, of course. But
And they finally recognize that they call them the eye, that the position is the eye of the Nihil.
Yeah. And they have a lot more. So if you think about it, and the reason why they have so much information on the Nihil is they have people that were prisoners during the Battle of Valo. And this comes up again in Tempest Runner. You get to find out that they know exactly they know about strikes and clouds, how things are broken up. I would expect they would know that Ro was
I think they've got their ships too, because I think they might have a path. At this
I think
point
that I remember that
by the end of Valo, I think there were some paths that they were able to salvage.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't real clear, but it certainly definitely implied.
They know about the path engines. I know that,
Right.
and I wonder if they're going to try to reverse engineer those in some way. It's all interesting, very intriguing stuff for sure. But the big so at this point when they finally get to when all the Jedi show up on Grizzle, this is where and it's really right when Bell gets off his ship. He immediately has a connection with Loden Greatstorm, which I know we haven't really spoken about Loden Greatstorm all this time. In fact, I don't know if we've really mentioned it at all. He is still alive. I mean, we said earlier that Bell couldn't feel him, but he's been on this ship. He's been on the Electric Gaze for this entire time. And we've talked about what Marchion Ro's been doing to him and all the tragic things there and all of that. But there's something different about the fact that Bell is now on that planet with him. And so much that it gives him, it like reinvigorates him. Like it gives him his force abilities back, at least enough for him to take Utter Sound and convince him with a Jedi mind trick or whatever I forget what the High Republic era called this thing, but
the mind touch.
The mind touch, right? He forces Utter Sound to release him. And at that point, he's frail. He's skin and bones.
He can barely stand. He can't catch himself when he falls.
Oh, yeah, it's horrible.
He's in rough shape.
He's in really rough shape. His Leku have been cut off, which I think is just horrible. Like, I don't visually understand what that would even look like, but it's got to look horrible. And it was funny, too, because they make a comment of, like, later on, he tells Bell, like, well, I can get implants for that or whatever, cybernetic implants. I'm like, why would you even do that?
I think Bell was saying that.
Yeah.
We can get you cybernetic implants.
Why would you do that? That's not important.
I don't know. I mean, it's such an insult, though, to do this.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is. It's disgraceful. It's shaming to have those things cut off in that way. They get into a fight, him and Marchion Ro do. But again, Loden's in no shape, really. I mean, Marchion Ro is by no means, he doesn't really come across to me as being well adept at combat in any way. But Loden's at a point where, it doesn't take a whole lot. And so they do get into a battle there. And, Ro gets covered up in a bunch of stuff, and eventually he disappears, and Loden's just trying to get out of there, so he doesn't pursue him. He'll come back in a little bit, but what's also going on throughout this book, and we've kind of glossed over it, but I want to come back to it just briefly, but he's been having conversations with Mari Santeca, and he doesn't know who it is. He just hears this voice talking to him the entire time, and eventually he finds his way into that room, and he sees her. He sees her in there with all the tubes, and he's trying to, I think he basically says, look, I'm paraphrasing, but hey, I'm going to try to rescue you. Like he feels like it's his duty to at least try to get her out of there. And she tells him no. Like she says, no, the thanks should be yours, Loden Greatstorm. You brought me back. You showed me the way. And then she tells him, go be with your Padawan, with Bell. Which again, another conversation that we need to have about what is her role in all of this. Well, we know I don't want to spoil anything, but she's not she's only in this for a little bit longer, folks. So somebody that I thought would be like pivotal would be somebody that would string through wave 2 or phase 2 and be, that pivotal in terms of the storyline. Turns out not to be, because she's going to kick the bucket here in Out of the Shadows.
And this was one of the parts that was really confusing to me, though, too, is everything, all of their conversations, Mari just seems like there's more to be. It just seems like there should have been more for her in general. Even going through Out of the Shadow, it just felt incomplete to me, her story. And I hope that there's something else at some point, but I'm not really hopeful that we're going to get anything for her. But that what did he bring her back from? Like what and for what purpose? And then what we get in Out of the Shadows, I'm sorry, was still a bit very, very vague of what she gave to her to Vernestra. And so I'm trying to understand her besides giving the paths and doing the things and that they kind of they figure all this stuff out eventually, the Jedi do, but like, what was her real purpose and all the things that the whole dialogue. I wish we could just read you all the dialogue between her and Loden.
Hmm.
And then because then you'd read it and you see where things went. You're like, what did this mean? I really was quite confused as to how, and maybe I just need you to sit there and talk to me about it for an hour and a half or so. But it just seemed like it was not, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me of what exactly she was trying to say to Loden at all, except you need your student and your student needs you.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, the thanks is to you for what? I don't.
I mean, unless it's like
Right.
unless she's again, I don't. This is part of that conversation I want to have. Like, I don't understand.
She seems more lucid now. Tell you
Sure.
right, she seems more lucid now than she did in Light of the
Yep.
Jedi.
Yep.
Right. I mean, there's that.
But I mean, how is she talking? Like, so I guess I'm assuming she's force sensitive, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because she's talking to Loden the entire time. So if she's force sensitive, then I don't. Is she at a degree where she can foresee the future? And was she telling Loden, look, your path, your destiny is somewhere else because you need to be there for Bell, or you're going to have to die because that's going to impact Bell, or right? Maybe again, this is purely speculation and theory on my part, but the only reason I could see her going through having all those conversations, saying the things she said, telling Loden that this is not his path, that he needs to go, no pun intended, he needs to go help Bell and be with Bell because she sees that something from that, some good is going to come from that of his death and being reunited in some way. And she just can't tell him because, that's what makes a good story, right? The drama of it all.
But there wasn't. But that didn't happen.
Well, and we don't.
The stuff went bad real
Stuff
fast.
went bad. Exactly. No, and I get what you're saying is I'm with you because if Tempest Runner, or sorry, if Out of the Shadows didn't go the way it went, I was really all in on this. Like, holy crap, what's going to happen next with her? And because it felt like there was a turning point, like she was going to, I don't know, rise up or start giving him bad paths, or you know what I mean? Like it felt like there was going to be something there, but then you get to Out of the Shadows and she's gone. And we don't really get the resolution that I think we wanted to get. The only saving grace in that story that not to say the story, because that's not fair. It's actually a pretty good book. The only saving grace I think from that theory about it was it all for nothing was something that was very vague at the very end about what you said, Vanessa Rowe. She gave Vanessa Rowe some coordinates and said, "Go here," and that was like it. There's no context about.
She basically gave Vern a path.
Exactly.
And because her and Vernestra seem to have a similar ability.
Right. And that's it. So are we, I guess wherever that story goes, maybe maybe there's something there that we can salvage from this whole thing. And it makes us feel better about how Mary Santeca went out. But maybe not. I don't know. I guess it's to be determined. We just don't know what she's supposed to go out and look for. We just know she gives her a path, gives these coordinates, heads out there. We'll see what happens. But
right.
Yeah. Anyways, I know that's probably, we went beyond the purview of what we're talking about here, but there's some more imagery here of that. Yeah, I mentioned these guys get into a little quarrel there. Eventually he makes his way down, he being Loden makes his way down, and he's finally knows that Bell's there. There's great build up there. They both are like happy. They're together. This is before that. Sorry. Markion Rowe kind of jumps him right at the last minute and fires like this needle thing. And he's too weak to kind of force block it. So he tries to jump back to get away from it, dodge that little needle that's coming at him. And by doing so, he falls off. I forget if it's like the platform or whatever, but he's essentially falling to his death, if you will. Right.
Yeah. It's basically a ramp on the Gaze Electric.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so thankfully Bell is there and we get that role reversal, right? This is how many times did Loden save Bell from falling? It was the flip side of it all, which I thought was really great. So Bell actually saves him using the Force while he's fighting too. Like, again, he's demonstrating some really crazy abilities here because he's jacked up or juiced up because Loden's here, but he's able to, as he's fighting and deflecting bolts and doing all kinds of stuff, he's actually Force holding Loden Greatstorm and pulling him back up. they finally get reunited. It's a really cool moment, very dramatic. They start talking about this is how it's supposed to be together again, blah, blah, blah. It's all wonderful. And then Marchion Ro decides to call in the Leveler, which really is how the book ends. I mean, Stellan Gios is there, right? Everybody's now showed up. All of the Jedi are there. There's a moment there where Ty York and Indira are trying to save Claren as well.
Yeah, because Claren sold them out.
Yep. Right. So all that's going on. That's all great stuff. But really, the key takeaway in those last like 5-6 chapters is this Leveler and the fact that these guys have been reunited. And Ro calls upon the Leveler that's down in the Gaze Electric somewhere. He's mounted a camera on the back of it so he can kind of witness and see, which I don't really understand that part of it yet, but I mean, it made for dramatic effect. But he's mounted a camera.
He wanted to see what would happen with the full power of the Leveler. I think.
Well, I want to see, intention. Yeah, and then we get it from the narrative, right? But I want to have him go back and watch it. Like I want there to be a chapter in some book somewhere where we get the sense of like what the Leveler saw and what that was like. Because hopefully we get that. But yeah, so this thing heads out. It actually rushes past Ro, which was interesting. He moves to the side as this thing runs by him. It's on all fours. I think it's Elzar Mann. Is it Elzar Mann that sees it in the air? I think it's him.
Yeah, Elzar's in a vector, but then he starts having when it comes out, he starts having intense force visions. Like the Leveler is starting to impact what's going on around him.
Yeah,
and Elzar takes a
nosedive. Yeah, it incapacitates him. Like it makes him like unconscious, I guess, and has him crash his ship. Which
I don't know how he survived.
Well, yeah, I mean I don't know.
The way that Cavan Scott wrote it,
there was nothing left.
You would have been like, okay, there's no way he survived that, but yeah, he was okay.
So imagine Kylo Ren in The Rise of Skywalker and the way his ship went down and tumbled, and you thought there's no way he survived, but it's Kylo Ren. Same kind of thing. Like it was. That's how I would describe it. There was no way he would have survived, yet he did. Although I would say, I mean, he didn't have a pulse. His heart had stopped, and Stellan Gios went out, ran to him, started beating on his chest and telling him he needed to live. And of course, he
don't die on me, damn it.
He saves his life, which is why I got Stellan Gios up right now here. But so the Leveler, and there's another episode here, right, on this thing and all the questions that come from it. But essentially, as it got closer, it impacted Elzar Mann. It then got to Bell. Bell, we didn't really get a sense from Bell what was going on. Outside of what was it, the visions that they were both having? Bell and Elzar were kind of having these visions. Bell forgot who he was, I guess, really. Like he didn't know.
Yeah, he was basically in a cavernous type of space. Yeah, we just no idea where he was, who he was.
Yep, he just drops into like the fetal position. I think when they find him after the Leveler's gone, which you don't get a lot of detail into where it went or how it left, he's literally sitting in on the ground there, curled up in the ball, and he's just crying. So we'll have to talk about that here about what that's going to be like for him going forward. But when it's all, I guess the dust is settled again, no pun intended.
Oh my gosh, that was totally intentional.
It was not intentional. We find that Loden is laying there. So Stellan runs up, or I guess he gets a call from somebody and says, "Hey, you need to come out here and check this out." He shows up.
It was Indira.
Yeah, Indira. Like, you're not going to believe what just happened. So they get out there, and that's where he sees Bell laying there crying, and kind of unsure of himself and lost and all that. But then next to him, there's, all this rubble and rock, and he realizes that one of the rocks has like 2 arms, 2 legs, and it turns out that that's Loden Greatstorm, that he's been turned to like what he thinks is rock.
I think he's been petrified, basically.
Yeah, it's what it looks like. He walks up and touches it, and the whole thing just kind of crumbles. And that video that they put together, I didn't even go through all these. That video they put together for that quick breakdown actually had Loden Greatstorm. You can see him in this picture here. They showed it, and then they added an effect where he just dissolved into like dust, and that's essentially what happens to him.
That's so wrong.
He's gone. I mean, Loden Greatstorm is gone. It's a character that we were not expecting to be taken at the end of Light of the Jedi. We were all pulling for him to kind of come back together, and they did. And within moments, a few chapters, he's suddenly gone, I guess, forever, right? And that's how the book ends. Like, if there's any one thing that I would say was a critique of the novel, I guess I have a couple, but nothing really major, was just I didn't like the way the book ended because maybe this was the intent, right? I mean, I guess it is. It ended in a way that you are just wanting to know what happened. I mean, you're literally screaming, "What the heck happened?" And you're thinking, "Okay, out of the shadows, man, give it to me. Give me the answers. Let's get the follow up." Nope, not really. I
Right.
mean, there are bits and pieces. I'm not going to say they're not, but you're not getting big answers to some of this stuff. You get the Tempest run, and you're like, okay, cool. Well, maybe there's something here. No, not really. There's nothing. I mean, it's all about Lorna D, which you expect. But what?
Yeah, there's they connect that part of the story with Pan and her,
Yes,
but yeah,
yes, exactly.
but
Those two pieces are connected. But again, all this stuff here, and Rose in Tempest Runner at the very end. But no, he's not talking about this, and he's not talking. I mean, it's 3 months after the events that happened here, right?
right.
So I don't know. There's just a lot of questions around this thing and what he did and how he was able to, what kind of an impact does he have? Is it like an area of effect, an aura that it emanates? How the heck did he turn something to stone? Right. That question
Yeah,
is
why was it Loden and not both
and
him and
Bell. Yeah.
Bell? Yeah, I don't. And again, I don't the way that he even just summons it, I don't understand. It seemed like it was some sort of device, but again, I don't know how that works with a creature, and then how he controls it that way. Yeah, there's just a lot of questions about how this thing actually
Yep.
works too. Is it loyal, for lack of a better, is it loyal to him, or does he have control over it? Can he will it where to go, or is it? I mean, clearly, it probably just seeks out Force users and yeah, feeds effectively, right?
Right. Well, and there were other force users around him. So why did he sense that one?
Right, yeah. Why did he go for that one? And then if Ro calls it back, does it just completely ignore all the other food? Or, and then if it's fed now, what is it stronger? Is it what? Yeah. There's so many unknowns about what this creature is and what it, just everything about it. Just so many questions.
There's when we get into talking about this at some point here, probably not next week, but the week after, there are some creatures out there in Star Wars. The one that comes to mind is the Leviathan, which is funny because that image I used of the leveler from the video game, that in the video game that thing was called the Leviathan. I'm
Right.
sure it's just coincidental, but that is the closest thing that I know of that I could even find that had some similarities to the power. There are certainly aspects of this that we've never seen in Star Wars. I mean, nullifying the Force is not unusual, right? There's at least 6 or 7 other, maybe even more than that, honestly, of creatures that can do that. But
Right.
given the effect and given the ability to like do more than just nullify the Force and turn somebody to stone, that's stuff we've never seen. I know Becca she responded to something I posted today saying that maybe it was the Bendu, which I thought was an interesting theory that it would be, but I don't see the Bendu as being like this uh malevolent. I can't see it being that like he never came across as being out to nullify the Force. And maybe this is an
Right.
earlier version. I don't know. I mean, it's a good theory, the fact that he can do this, and the Bendy was certainly in the middle, right? That was his whole point. He was never not good, not bad, Jedi. He was not Jedi nor Sith. That whole thing possible, but I think we have a whole brand new entity being here, which is probably the most fascinating aspect for me of this whole thing was just this character, the Leveler, and what it means for the Jedi going forward.
And is there only one?
Ooh, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, are there more? It's interesting concept.
Yep. Yeah, I mean I guess we're for final thoughts where the Jedi left. I mean, they are in fear. I think was it somebody? I think it was Stellan Geos. They wrote it. He writes it as this is the first time he's felt fear or something like that. Or
Right. Yep.
um,
That was basically, yeah, I think that's more or less exactly how it ended. For the first time in his life, he was actually afraid of something.
mhm.
And everyone is just, and now we see in the subsequent content that we've had where there's rumors going on about what happened with Loden, with Padawans,
Oh, where
but
they're
no one's
talking
really
about it. Yeah,
clear. Yeah, no one's really clear about what happened, or do they even know what happened? Or are they just not telling anybody? And you can imagine this type of thing is going to spread through the order pretty quickly, and it's going to be concerning. And then I'll give the Jedi a little bit credit though. Even knowing that, they haven't shied away from their responsibility. But it's very, and the thing that was a little bit disappointed about Out of the Shadows is that we really didn't get any kind of any kind of impression of after all of this that there was any that they were really all that worried. I mean, Stellan Gios didn't. I don't recall anything that really gave us the impression that he was super concerned about this anymore. I don't even think they referenced it at all, did they?
Not really. Like I said, it's not. I mean, it's more. It's almost like a side story running in parallel with some things that happen post the Rising Storm, much like
Right.
Tempest Runner. You know what I mean? Like they're certainly in Wave 2. It makes sense for them to be Wave 2, but they are not direct sequels, and we may not get a direct sequel until we get to the Fallen Star. Maybe, you know what I mean? Unless they pick it
Right.
up in
Yeah.
comics and make little comments here or there, or have little panels and stuff that they talk about it. Um,
But there we are.
yeah, I was trying to think. I was trying to remember like the what was it? Trail of Shadows, that detective comic that's coming out. I thought maybe it would be that. It's not. It has to do with the Republic Fair, something at the Republic Fair, not here. But yeah, the Jedi's
Right.
response to this should be very, very interesting. We don't see it yet in the comics, even though the most recent High Republic was it number 10? I forget what number we're on now.
8.
Was it 8?
Yeah, 8's 9 hasn't come out
Okay.
yet.
The most recent one though doesn't really address it. They address what happened, like we said. They talked about between Stellan
Right.
Gios and Avar Chris kind of going back and forth on security measures and not taking things lightly, and they get into some of that, but still no word yet on the aftermath and fallout of Living Great Storm, or the events here at the very end. So okay, well, what we thought for hour 4 we do. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, I mean, overall, I guess I'll give you my final thoughts, and I'll let you kind of have the last words. We can get out of here. I really enjoyed this book. I know I didn't really get to talk about my thoughts and opinions on it earlier on, but I have it up there as pretty high. Like, I'm not even kidding you. It's really high for me. It just had everything I like about stories and novels, and the way it read and the way it was written. It just really resonated with me. Like, my favorite book in Star Wars is still probably Heir to the Empire. Is this really close? Yeah, it's like really, really close. They were very
Yeah.
similar in vein to me, and just the pacing and the way he was kind of weaving the stories in and out and all of that. It was all kind of pretty apparent to me. So, in fact, I've been so much that I've been invigorated. I want to go back and read now the whole Heir to the Empire series again, just to see if maybe this is where, if there's anything that we can pull from that, and then obviously for the reasons of the Bad Batch and where that's going to go. But so back to the book though. I thought it was really wonderful. Enjoyed every aspect of it. I want to go back and listen to the audiobook now more. There was bits and pieces I listened to because you were mentioning them or we were talking about them, but I've not had a chance to really just sit down and listen to the audiobook. And I think there's some parts that I'd love to hear audibly than read them, because I don't feel like they would steal the voices that I have in my head at this point. So I think I'm safe
Most
there.
of them were most of them were quite good. Like Panetta's voice is absolutely perfect. Still taking some getting used to on Markion, but I think overall it doesn't. I know some of the concern you had about it was sometimes it rewrites the scene that you created
Mhm.
in your head as you read it, and but I think it does pretty well. From what I read, it was fairly consistent, almost all the time with what I had in my head. I don't think it really took much away from it. I think you might enjoy
Well, I
it.
started listening to it. You remember, I think I
Mhm.
texted you and said, "Hey, how often?" I asked you whether or not you knew how much Mark Thompson is given in terms of the context and direction, and
Yeah,
how to say certain words, because the parts that I was listening to, I didn't read them as that. Like, he was putting inflection in words, and it changes the context. It changes
right.
whatever, yeah, the context of how it's being said and what's behind it, and that's very different, right? It kind of throws me for a loop, which I'm not saying is right or wrong, but if that's the way it's supposed to be, then maybe I've been reading these things wrong, or I'm reading too much into it, or I'm not reading enough into some of the things that are being said. um so credit to the actors, for the voice actors, because their ability to do all that. But so the only other thing I'd say about the book, um it it felt very Empire to me, in some aspects of kind of the Jedi are really getting beaten down here. I don't think we're going to see a true Empire theme-ish, like they're really at the lowest point, until we get out of somewhere either at the end of Wave 1 or somewhere in Wave 2, right? I almost see that as Wave 1 kind of being New Hope, Wave 2 being Empire, Wave 3 being Revenge or Return of the Jedi. It was a very dark book, all things considered. And I will say this too, like, I get a lot of people are still like, this is not I don't really care about the High Republic, because I don't really like any of the characters. I don't know any of the characters, and they're all new. And how can you really like them? And I'll tell you, I'll say this. I'll be the first to say, if you don't read the if you went through the first wave and you didn't like any of the books and didn't like any of the characters or nothing resonated with you, there's probably no turning back at this point. Like I don't understand how you're
Right.
ever going to get on board with this series, and it is a steamrolling engine, man. That is coming. I mean, there's so much stuff that's coming out with the
It does
comics.
not slow
No,
down.
we've got Edge of Balance coming out in a couple days. They've already announced Wave 3. I hear the latest rumor is we're going to get the covers and some pretty big news coming at the next Republic show, the High Republic show. So it's not slowing down, and it's going to be very hard for anybody to just jump in. I think at this point, like I
Right.
mean, unless you're willing to just say, okay, I don't really care about all that, and I'll just try to make sense of it all. I don't know a lot of people have the time to invest in the number of stories because it's all books and literary work. So it's very difficult. So what I was saying is, if you're not into the High Republic at this point, I don't think you're going to be able to. And I think it's fair to say that I just don't care about the High Republic. That's fine. I don't think you're going to care about it. But if you've made an effort to at least like the characters and kind of understand where they are, it's pretty exciting. I get really stoked talking about it. I don't think I've been tweeting about anything lately outside of High Republic.
No, that's pretty much all
Yeah,
you've
that's
been.
all I've been doing. I mean, there's just so much there. There's so many things, and I'm trying to go. Okay, let me pull in parallels from stuff that's happened in other books and comparing them to stuff that we've seen in the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. There's a lot of parallels here, and these are all by design. These guys are doing this on purpose because they're all well versed in all this stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand all that, but yeah, I enjoy this era a lot more than I thought I would. I was pretty excited when it came out. I would say by the end of at least the Rising Storm, like I'm all in. Like whatever, I'll take whatever I can get anytime I can get it at this point.
Yeah, it's hard. I think whenever you start getting further along into a series, this is a lot of people's issues with expanded universe. Once you get so far into it, okay, what are the stories I have to know just to get caught up, or I'm just way too far behind to do it now? I think if you got through Rising Storm and you haven't been entertained and you haven't gravitated towards it, if this one didn't do it for you, then yeah, I'm this High Republic's probably not for you. If you stuck with it from Light of the Jedi and you gave it through Rising Storm and maybe through Out of the Shadows, but primarily Rising Storm, like this is one of my I'm with you. This is one of my favorite Star Wars books in all everything they've written
Hmm.
since since whenever. And and there's some really good ones out there. And like you said, the Zahn trilogy, I've really, of course, I love Dark Disciple and
Yeah.
a couple others like that. But this is just really good because you're right. It has everything. It has a great pace to it. The number of chapters is really high, but the way that they structure them and jump a little bit keeps things a bit interesting. They don't go too far with, they don't spend 10 chapters and then go back to another story. So it's all still happening there. It's sometimes a little easy to get, moved around and feel a little jostled. But I think now that they've settled from where they were at with Light of the Jedi, you just got to introduce so much at once, which I still question a little bit of that, but now they've really found a good rhythm, and we're seeing this with the other material as well, that the stories are well written, and they're well thought out, and they're very well connected, and they're drawing inspiration from even within the same story. There are things that are not being wasted. So when you learn something at the beginning of the story, it is still vital and important and worthwhile to try to recall some of that. Now, sometimes it gets a little overwhelming, the things you have to try to remember and go back to, but I think Kevin Scott in particular on this one did a really good job of balancing that out pretty well where, yeah, it's good to know these things, but if you forget them, no big deal. He'll touch on them a little bit later and really do it. But this one was just breakneck speed though. For as long as this book was what 76 chapters and like 450 pages, something like that.
How long was the audiobook?
Oh,
I mean, it had to be
I
like
don't remember.
10, 12 hours at least.
13, yeah, it's maybe 12, 13 hours.
Yeah.
But for that long of a book though, you really just wanted to keep reading it, and it didn't feel like it just dragged on and on and on, and it took you forever. It really I wouldn't call it a quick read, but it was a very interesting read, a very engaging
Mm.
read, and it was just as much on the audiobook too. It was just a really good story, and, but if you're not in, you're not in, that's cool. There's a lot of other stuff out there, that's for sure. There's no shortage of Star Wars coming. We got Visions coming in just 2.5 weeks,
Yep.
right? Something like
Yep.
that.
That's right.
So, yeah, there's a lot of cool things, but man, I'm excited about High Republic. I have never been higher on High Republic than I have been these last month or so since this book came out and some of the other things going on. And I've even been inspired by you. I'm starting to go out there and look at all the comic variants now. That's your fault.
Good luck. I found some other ones recently here that I'm like, oh man,
Oh
am I ever
yeah,
gonna get these?
I found a treasure trove of ways to sink money into that you should never sink money into.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
It takes willpower, man.
And
Willpower.
so for anybody that doesn't know, the variants are most of the variants are because of publishing runs. So once they hit a certain amount, they go into second printing and third printing and fourth printing. So you get these variants that come out because of that, which speaks to the success of the book. If you're in the industry or been following the industry long enough, you know that sometimes they will lower the amount and say, okay, we're only going to do 100,000, and they're kind of lowering expectations, knowing they're probably going to do 200,000 or 300,000, but they're also going to sell additional comics for people that collect the variants and all that. So it's like it's a game, right? But you can't stop. The numbers are the numbers. They are still selling comics. This comic in high fashion. If at least where I'm in Austin, like they're always sold out, or they're hard to find, or the price at Austin Books and Comics are pretty high at this point for the variants and some of the lower print runs and stuff like that. It's even hard to find issue number 1 first printing. And they printed a crap ton of those because they were expecting it, people to at least buy it and show interest in it. So
And I think the first issue I think went through four printings.
I think it might, well, at least.
Yeah, I think I was looking on a website today, and I thought the only one I didn't get to see the first printing, but I definitely saw a fourth. Maybe that was for the second issue though. There's a lot, and they just announced the next two these previous two were going into a second printing already, maybe a third. So it's definitely got some steam behind
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it
It's
does.
here to stay.
I would say the only thing, I promise this will be the last thing I say. The only thing I would say about if I had to give, I don't really have a lot of negatives on this book, honestly. I don't. I know that sounds super, I don't know, fanboyish, shill, whatever. You can call me whatever you want. I don't care. I just don't have a lot of issues with the book. I think it's great. The only feedback I would say for the High Republic in general, and you and I touched on this again off air, but at times it is a lot to take on, right? If you're a completionist and you're trying to keep up with it all, you can't let your guard down. Like, you have to constantly stay on top of this stuff, and every week there's something new. And that's fine. That's not really the feedback. The feedback comes as a result of that. Sometimes it does feel like we are going almost too fast through certain things. Like we're not spending the right amount of time on things that people are really resonating with people, like maybe the Drengir or a Loden, or I don't know. I haven't really thought that through on examples. It's just a feeling I have where it doesn't feel like things are staying around too long. And there's these big gaps in time, right? I mean, a year jump between Light of the Jedi and the Rising Storm ish, right? Somewhere around there. A lot happened, and we don't know what happened. And maybe we don't need to know, because it's enough for them to just say, look, they've been battling the Drengir, and this is where we're at, and we just kind of move on, accept it. But if I'm, as a completionist that's out there trying to find everything, I want to know what's going on in these stories. And there seems like there's other things that are coming up in the first wave that they've not touched on yet. Like, they may have talked about it very briefly, but you were almost led to believe that there was going to be something there, and it doesn't pan out. So are they putting too many threads out there? Right, would be a concern too. There's too many things going on. Too many storylines, too many. It's almost like the whole Lost thing, where they've got all these threads and they've got this board with all the strings and the Post-it notes, and it's going to become too overwhelming at some point, and they're just going to have to say, you know what, we're not going to be able to come back to that. There's just too much going on. We've got to keep on pace with the main story and the stuff that we want to get out. That would be the only critique I have. It's starting to kind of feel that way to some extent, but it hasn't really gotten in the way of me being able to support it or keep up with it. I'm just worried about people that are just kind of like interested, but not fully vested in it, that want to stay on top of it. I don't know how they're going to fare with this pace.
That's why they have us.
Yeah, right. Hey, we can do a 3-hour show for you.
That's right. So, and we got Patreon content out the wazoo.
Speaking of Patreon, we're going to get out of here. Do you have anything else before we go? Do you want to? We're not doing Patreon night. It's too late now.
All right. Go read this book, people. Seriously, it's worth your time. It's a really good book. Go read it. And we will bring you lots more coverage around the Rising Storm and some of the other books coming across. There's so much to dig into and so many threads to chase, and we're going to do it all until we want to change subjects like Visions.
Yeah, well, no.
Oh, and Ronin.
Oh yeah, we got Ronin. I haven't even touched that book yet.
Oh my!
Is it good?
Oh,
You can say whether it's good.
I haven't got all the way through it yet. So we've got preview copies, of course, and I love this writing style. Absolutely
Lord.
love this writing style.
All right. I guess I'll read it. Okay.
Yeah, twist your arm.
Twist my arm. All right, we're going to get out of here. Thanks again for everybody that joined us in the live feed. I know we had a lot of folks in here that were regulars. I know we've been on a 3-hour spurt, but we haven't been on for 2 weeks. So at the end of the day, it all kind of balanced out, right? So what do you expect?
Yeah, and thanks to Ryman 6000 showing up for the first time. Kind words at the start of the show. So thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, I saw that on there. Tuan, Steph, Hard Counter dropped in, said hello. Rick was on here.
Yeah, Cole, yeah. Got all the huge. So we appreciate it, folks.
Yep. And as a special treat, I have special Patreon credits that we created. So if you saw the Tempest Runner non-spoiler thing, I threw them in there. But if not, this may be the first time you've seen them. So, okay, with that, we will get out of here. And next week, we'll be back with Tempest Runner. That should be a shorter show. We'll kind of do the same kind of format, touch on some of the highlights and what you need to know without listening to the audiobook. Although that book's only I think it's like a 6-hour listen, so it's not very long. But we'll touch on that. And then after that, we're going to come back between then and the start of Visions. We'll be talking more High Republic and breaking down some of the things that we touched on loosely here. I really want to touch on some of these themes and get into the leveler and just kind of a pulse check on where the Jedi are and where their heads at, and all that stuff that is really interesting that we'd like to talk about. So with that, I guess we'll see you guys in 1 week.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.